Hey guys. This is part 20 of What If Naruto Was Sealed and Woke Up After 2000 Years. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 50. Commence the spilling of the beans. Location: the Normandy. Ruko wasn't pacing. She wasn't. Pacing was a waste of energy, and it wouldn't do anything. She was sitting on her bed and staying put. But she realized that whether she was pacing or sitting on her bed didn't matter. She kept looking up the stairs, to the rest of the ship, to the med bay. She was worried about the cheerleader. It surprised her since she didn't want to worry about her. But ever since that explosion, when she saw the wound on the cheerleader, the blood she was losing, it scared Ruko. It scared her more than anything she had felt before. When she carried her back to the ship, she held onto her like she could have slipped away at a moment's notice. It was only after Dr. Chukwas took her that Ruko realized what she had done. Now she was confused. Why did she do that? Why did she carry the cheerleader off Horizon? Her thoughts went to her brother, and what he said. Initially she derided the thought. She hated the cheerleader, and everything she stood for. But nowadays, especially after Pragia, it was different. She wasn't too sure if she actually hated the cheerleader now. But if she didn't hate her, how did she feel about her? Was it something else? Something other than hate? They weren't fighting as much now, but they weren't exactly friendly. Could that be something? Was her fear on Horizon something more? Her first reaction was to shoot the idea down. How could it be something else? She knew she disliked the cheerleader. It was an accepted fact, comfortable. But it wasn't the truth. Ruko didn't know what the truth was, and that made her nervous. It was why she was down here, in her lair. She didn't know what would happen if she went and talked to the cheerleader. A part of her wanted to stay the course, keep on hating her for being a part of the Akatsuki. But another part of her wanted to see where it would go, if things would be different. She knew that she was different. She wasn't the same person who first came aboard the Normandy. It was because of Naruto. Her self-proclaimed brother, and she could admit that she liked it, was a calm, reassuring presence in her life. Whenever she threatened him, he would always smile and laugh, never reacting in fear. He would always listen to what she had to say. It was something different for her, something new. She found herself wanting to prove herself worthy of the love he gave her. Wonder what he would say about this, she muttered to herself, staring at her knee. The second she said it, she already knew. For the love of Kami, Ruko. Would you just go and talk to her already? It was like a whisper against her ear, yet she could hear it clear as day. And he was right. She stood up and headed for the stairs. As the elusive man came into view, sitting in his chair with a cigarette in one hand and a glass in the other, he looked as calm and collected as ever. That pissed off Naruto, and he knew it showed in his scowl. Commander Uzumaki, the elusive man, greeted him. He took a swig from his drink and looked at him once more. I trust that things on Horizon went as planned. How's about we cut right through the bullshit, huh? Demanded Naruto. You lied to me. You've been lying this entire time. He paused in his chair, something that the people who knew him well would have thought not really possible. Perhaps if you could tell me what kind of bullshit we're supposed to be cutting through, I would be able to help you better? A growl threatened to bubble out from his throat, but he quashed it. If the elusive man heard it, he would have the edge, and Naruto wasn't going to give it to him. You knew who was going after the human colonies from the start. It wasn't the tribe. It was the collectors. Ah, I see. He smoked his death stick and blew smoke into the air. Tell me, how did you come to figure that out? Miranda told me. That is unfortunate. I gave clear orders that you weren't to be told about the collectors until I deemed it necessary. If they were in the same room together, that would have been the time Naruto had to mentally keep himself strangling the guy. It was a good thing that they weren't on the same ship, let alone the same room. It's a little hard to keep that kind of secret when they land on the planet you're on and seem intent on coming after you. This time, he got the satisfaction of watching the man's eyes widen in surprise. It wasn't obvious since they only moved a few inches out, but it was enough for him. They were at Horizon? The elusive man said. Yeah, showed up pretty much after the council and the tribe did, he replied. I see. That is, unfortunate. Unfortunate? The blonde repeated. That's all you have to say about this? He puffed out a trail of smoke. What else is there to say, Commander? The collectors appeared far earlier than I had hoped. This could hinder the plans the Akatsuki has made, but we can adapt. Goody for you. Now how about you start explaining why you didn't tell me the truth, HM? Because I did not think you were ready for them, Commander. He leaned back slightly in his chair, completely relaxed about everything that seemed to be happening. When we rescued you, you had inhibitors planted in your body that prevented you from using your chakra. As that is a key part of your strength, you would have been restricted against the collectors. I would even dare to imagine that they would be able to get you when you were in that state. So you sent me on that wild goose chase, Naruto said accusingly. But even though he was being accusative, it was partially an act. As far as he knew, only 2 people knew the truth about the implants, and he was going to keep it like that as long as he could. I would not say it was a wild goose chase. Peresi sending you after the tribe to investigate the disappearances was a subterfuge. I had hoped that you would use that mission to find out how to completely destroy the inhibitors. That way, you would be able to attack the collectors with much more ease. Well, that's out of the window. Now tell me everything that you have on them. There is not much that can be explained. You've seen the aftermath of their work in Freedom's Progress. So you knew that it was them, he said accusingly. He could remember those empty streets and rooms looking like the people living there had just stepped out but not yet come back. It was a chilling, silent place that was only interrupted by the sound of gunfire. I had my suspicions, but proof was needed. Proof is always needed. He sipped his drink and continued, the collectors are enigmatic at best. They periodically travel to the Terminus system, looking to gather unimportant items or species. Usually in exchange for their technology, he explained. I take it that what they've got is much better than ours. Much better, he acknowledged. When their transactions are complete, they disappear as quickly as they arrived, back beyond the unmapped Omega-4 relay. Until recently, we've had no evidence of direct aggression by the collectors. Let me guess, they got blatant when they attacked the Normandy for me? It wouldn't be unreasonable. They have been sighted on a few worlds that they had no business being in the weeks after the attack. He looked at Naruto pointedly. What's that supposed to mean? I believe you wanted to cut through the bullshit, Commander. That is what I am doing. He took a drag from his cigarette, making the silence go on longer. I had received reports of sightings of you after the Normandy was destroyed. I sent men to investigate, and they did report back that it was you. It was only a few weeks later that we lost track of you. I suspect that was when the tribe managed to grab hold of you. I was right all along then, Naruto thought to himself. But he also knew that wasn't all the elusive man knew about that time. Miranda had to have told him about his suspicions. But as much as he wanted to voice them at that moment, he kept it silent. He wasn't going to rat Miranda out, not like this. Instead, he went with a slightly different approach. Do you have proof of that? Not concrete. What I do have is the fact that the tribe bought you off the Shadow Broker. Please, he held up his hand to stop Naruto from speaking, don't ask me the question on your tongue. The information is sketchy at best, and the person who passed on that information soon died of wounds. We spent the next 2 years looking for you. So, you've been watching me after I disappeared. Again, I will be honest with you, Commander, he said. We've been watching you long before then. That was deeply unsettlingly, even more so when he said it so casually. He knew he had all the cards that would make the winning hand, and he wasn't trying to keep them hidden, only in reserve. If Naruto went down with this line of questioning, there would be no doubt that the elusive man would tell and also silently show him how much power he has in the galaxy, and possibly over him. But if he didn't ask, that question would hang around and nag at him. So he had to ask, how long? The elusive man tilted his head ever so slightly. What do you mean by that question, Naruto? You're not my friend. You don't get to use my name. How long were you watching me? We had people in place to observe you as you hunted after Saren. Miranda herself was on the Citadel while you were there. And even before then we were observing you. What? You had people in the hospital on Thesha or something? Yes. But we were watching even before that. A frown appeared on his face. There was no before that. That was where I woke up. The only other place I had been was... He trailed off as he thought those words over, and the implication settled into his head. You were watching when I was sealed? The elusive man nodded in acknowledgement. Yes. Admittedly, it was only for 2 weeks, and 2 of those days were wasted before we figured out that it was the same object that you had been sealed inside of. We observed you and tried guiding the meteor to a planet where we would be able to ensure your safety before and after you were unsealed. So once I was unsealed, I would be in your grasp and you could indoctrinate me against the rest of the galaxy? He demanded, anger beginning to bubble up his throat again. He could actually see it being played out in his mind. He would have been glad that they had managed to pull him out of that damn rock, and he would have been depressed about how long he was sealed away. After giving him an appropriate time to grieve and get used to the fact, they would pounce right back on him, training him back up to his proper level and teaching him what they thought about the galaxy. And once he was ready, they would send him out to do their bidding. Naruto? Said Matatabi. What? He asked. You do realize that you just described how you spent your time recovering on Thesha, right? He fell silent, thinking over what he had thought. Shit, you're right, he finally said, realizing the truth of the Nibby's words. I was that close to making the two inseparable. Why didn't you? Isabu asked. The Alliance gave me the honest view of the galaxy. The Akatsuki wouldn't have. I would not have said it like that, Commander, the elusive man protested mildly. We certainly would have done our best to break you out of that seal and bring you up to speed on what was happening in the galaxy. But the rest of it would just be speculation on your part. If that's the case, why did I wake up on Thesha? He challenged. That was out of our hands. For some reason, the meteor diverted from the course we had set in for it and hurtled towards Asari space. By the time we could have reached it, it was already going straight for Thesha. He found that a little funny and a smirk threatened to appear on his lips. Maybe I felt what you guys were thinking and decided to turn. Commander, let us be serious, the elusive man said with a slight frown. Naruto did want to stay on point, and where he had been flying while in that rock wasn't on point. Alright, let's get back to the collectors. What exactly do they go looking for? They aren't very forthcoming with their motives. Generally, they seek out species with rare genetic mutations or abnormalities. They pay slavers and merc groups exorbitant sums to obtain these specimens. And then they leave. But they've never targeted a single species before. And the previous sample sizes were in the dozens, the tens of thousands. That was a chilling thought, and he almost shuddered at the thought of that many people being taken. Tens of thousands, he repeated in his mind. Kami, that's as many people in the land of fire, earth, and lighting combined. Before the war, Kurama added. Yeah, before the war, he agreed. Things were a lot different before the war. He didn't have to see mountains and seas of dead bodies, let alone traverse them, hoping to never see someone he knew there. More often than not he did. But that wasn't something he could, or wanted to, focus on now. What do you think they would do all this? If I knew, I would end it, the elusive man told him with an edge to his voice. All I can say is that I believe that they're working for the Reapers, just as Saren and the Geth-aided Sovereign. You've seen it yourself. You bested all three of them. He was silent. The Reapers, he thought and hoped that he wouldn't have to hear about them again in this lifetime. One Reaper had been enough to almost overwhelm the Citadel, and the Council with it. The plural form of that idea was even more scary, probably even more so than Obito. And in Naruto's books, there were very few things in the galaxy that were able to top Obito during the war. How sure are you about that? He asked the elusive man as he took a drink. How sure are you that it is the Reapers? The head of the Akatsuki put the empty glass in his chair. The patterns are there, buried in the data. The Council and the Alliance want to believe the Reaper threat ended with Sovereign. You and I know better. If you're talking about heads of states wanting to disbelieve what they've heard about threats, I know. Ah yes, the destruction of Idagawa and the loss of the Fire Daimyo, he said in acknowledgement. If I remember, it was that event that caused Konoha to take over and effectively rule the land of fire. Yeah, I remember that, Naruto thought to himself. The politicians who managed to survive the capital's destruction were able to do a miraculous thing. In his opinion, they put the petty squabbling aside and turned to Konoha for guidance. He could still remember Tsunade's face would scrunch up in distaste when someone mentioned that she was in charge in the country, not just the village. He was glad to have read that once the war was over, she gave the power back to the new daimyo. But since he learned about the shinobi uprising, he took it that people in the village thought that they could do a better job. That was a move that didn't turn out well in the long run, he finally said. On the contrary, I believe that it worked out perfectly. But I digress. We're not here to talk about the past but the present. His gaze hardened, which made his eyes just a little bit more eerie. I won't wait until the Reapers are on the march. We need to take the fight to them. Then just go through the Omega-4 relay and do that. Commander, be serious. Mounting that kind of attack through an unmapped relay is not only suicidal but also stupid. Map it then. It didn't seem to be that difficult to do to him. I mean, why hasn't anyone done that before? Because any and all ships passing through it have never returned, the elusive man answered, taking a drag. Our best guess is that the relay reacts differently to collector vessels, allowing them safe passage. If they can manipulate relays, that's just further evidence of the connection with the Reapers. Alright, what are you going to do about it then? I'm devoting all resources to finding a way through the Omega-4 relay. We have to hit them where they live. But this will cause a complication on your end. How so? He asked. The smoke screen the Akatsuki's been effectively running for you will vanish. You will be in sight of the collectors and they will come after you now. Good. Let them. He wanted to plow through them all and get to the answers. But the elusive man frowned at him as he blew smoke. Commander, do not overestimate yourself. The smoke screen was put in place because you were too weak to take the collectors head on. If you had, the possibility that you would lose and be captured was quite real and high. We simply could not risk that. Naruto scowled hard at him. I'm not some toy or weapon that you hide away until it's convenient. These collectors want to find me, they're welcome to try. The frown stayed there as he took the cigarette out of his mouth. He looked at it for a second, as if he was considering the secrets that could possibly lay within. He brought it down into the ashtray and stubbed it out, rather hard. Commander, I would appreciate it if you did not take the lives lost for your protection as something that can be waved away. The anger and annoyance he had felt at the beginning of the conversation froze at those words. What? Somehow, the collectors have managed to get a track on your Churka signature. I had hoped that when you broke the inhibitors, it would be all at once and you would have your complete arsenal of jutsu back in your control. But that hasn't been the case, and the collectors have noticed. I have sent people out into the galaxy running decoy with your chakra signature, making the collectors chase after them. Each and every time one of them was caught, they did not make it through the interrogation alive. And you stand there challenging the collectors to come after you like their deaths meant nothing. He did not raise his voice, but Naruto knew that he was angry. It was like he was looking at Sasuke when he wanted nothing but vengeance again. He was keeping that angry inside, where no one would be able to see it. The difference between them was the elusive man knew how to handle that anger. Sasuke hadn't. More importantly, the blonde now felt like a complete asshole. Taking lives for granted had been something he had never done, not since the war really began. And he just went and did it. Well, they were a part of the Akatsuki, Saiken pointed out to him. Is that supposed to make me feel better? He asked. Just trying to help, the slug replied. Bad way to do that, Gyuki told him. Kurama nodded. You should know by now that anyone dying for him, he will take personally. Why do you think he got so driven near the end of the war? I can hear you. I know, and I don't care. Now go and make that apology you know won't do anything but you still give it anyway. He restrained the urge to strangle the nine-tailed fur ball because he knew that it was impossible. I'm sorry, he said to the elusive man, meaning the words with complete sincerity. He didn't say anything in reply, not right away. He sat there, watching the blonde shinobi bow his head. The silence extended for seconds, turning into a minute before he finally said, What's done is done. You cannot change their fates. If you don't want any more to die or more humans to be taken, you will have to act. He raised his head. That's what I intend to do. Your team will need to be strong, as will their resolve. There's no looking back. Once we find a way through the Omega-4 relay to the collector homeworld, there's no guarantee you'll return. With those words, Naruto found his attitude again. I know. There was no guarantee that I would come back from fighting Obito. Hell, it was more likely that I would die. But I still went. Indeed. If that is the case, to have any hope of surviving, you, and your entire team, must be fully committed to this. I know that. They know that. I just want to be upfront about your odds. You'll need everyone at their best. You got any suggestions? He could probably talk to his team, see if they had something to say. But aside from that, he was drawing a blank. Yes. I have 3 more dossiers for you. Keep building your team while I find a way through the relay. He leaned back in his chair. And be careful out there, Commander. The collectors will be looking for you now. How you slip past them will be up to you now. The room he sat in with the star illuminating everything in the background vanished. For a moment, Naruto was left in total darkness. Then he was back in the conference room on the Normandy. As he turned around, he saw Jacob standing by the door. I guess we're really going to do it, he said without preamble. Hit the Omega-4 relay, take the fight to the collectors in person. He stopped and looked at the man. I don't like being kept in the dark, Jacob, especially when it concerns me. I hear you, Commander. I do. But it wasn't my call. He folded his arms against his chest. So what do we do now? Rest and recuperate for the moment. I need to check in with Morden to see if he can do anything about masking my chakra signature. I also need to see how Quan Misley and Miranda are doing in the med bay. He looked a little embarrassed. Yeah, about that. Don't tell me. She already checked herself out and got back to work. His eyes showed his puzzlement. Yeah, how did? I used to do the same thing every time I ended up in the hospital, the shinobi replied. Tsunade tried putting guards at my door, but I kept getting out without them noticing. So she resorted to putting me in a windowless room and having me strapped to the bed. That's cruel, Jacob said. What else could he say? He shrugged. If you want to call it that. You don't. He was strapped to a bed for Cammy's sake. I just thought it was her way of making sure that I properly healed. I always got out in a day or two anyway. He paused and his face turned thoughtful. You know, I wonder if I still hold that record. What record? Most successful escapes from hospital, he answered. Jacob just stared at the blonde shinobi, almost not believing it. That actually existed? Yeah, they even gave me a plaque for it. He left the conference room knowing full well that Jacob was trying to figure out whether or not he was joking. You're cruel, Gyuki accused him. No, he's mischievous, Kurama corrected him. There's a difference. He stood in the med bay, looking down at Quan Misley. Well, she looks like shit, Sun declared. That might be selling it short, Coco remarked. Whether it was being sold short or not, they all could tell that the hunter did not look good. She was unconscious and had a machine giving her air through a tube. Save for a bra for modesty's sake, her entire torso was bare and slathered with Medigel, trying to heal the damage caused by the explosion. Her face was slathered too, and it all gave her the appearance of being overly oiled. But it was all so she could heal. How's she doing? He asked Dr. Chukwas. Can't you look? Sun asked him. I want the medical opinion. She'll be fine, the doctor assured him, looking from where she was sitting and working. She just needs to stay in bed and recover from her injuries. That much he gathered, but he was more concerned about the length of time. How long will she be abed? I would say about a week, maybe 2. She caught the brunt of the explosion on her armor, but she's still pretty hurt. I know that much. He had helped carry her into the medbay once they were aboard. The armor was damaged by the explosion, that the shields were completely destroyed. They had to peel her out of the armor, and when that didn't work, they hacked it off. Needless to say, her armor was in shambles and there looked like there was no chance it could be repaired. Don't worry, Commander. She'll be fine. She will be here and you two can have a chance to kiss and make up. She paused for a moment and continued. Well, perhaps not so literally. I think the Pirate Queen of Omega would have something to say about that. He gave her an eyeful. It would be along the lines of what took you so long. And what do you mean by that kiss and make up thing? I do have eyes and ears, sir. I've watched how the two of you interacted since we started flying around in this crate. You've gone from avoiding her like the fire plague to treating her like she was a barely tolerable cat around the house. That was a description he had never heard of before. But he could understand what she was trying to say. I changed my attitude about her that much? She nodded. Yes. That's one thing I've always liked about you, Commander. You care about the soldiers under your command. There are people out there, across all the species, that don't have that kindness in them, only caring about the mission or making sure they live. I've known a few of those guys, he replied, thinking back to the war momentarily. Those were the people who didn't last long. There was that one guy from IWA, Kurama told him. The one that everyone thought was an ass. He stifled a groan at the mere mention of that particular shinobi. Don't remind me. I've done my best to forget him. Was he really that bad? Komi, I asked. Gyuki nodded his horned head. Yeah, he was. The nickname that everyone had for him was Slimy. Hey! Saiken protested. It's not an offense to you, Saiken. That guy kept getting the people under his command killed, yet he would get away without a scratch. He kept getting off because he technically had finished the mission given and he had the Earth Daimyo's backing. Naruto kept looking at Quan Misley as she laid there in the bed. You want to hear something no one else knows, Doc? He asked out of the blue. She looked up from her work. What? I never wanted to be put in command of anything. She turned to face him fully. Really? She asked him. He looked at her and nodded. Yeah, really, he said. Well, she remarked as she leaned against her chair, I must admit that is something I did not expect, Commander. You have proven that you know to lead a team and make sure that you get them out alive. For the most part, the blonde said with a hint of bitterness, looking down at the hunter but thinking about Kaden. Dr. Chuck was winced slightly at his words. Talking about how he was able to get the team out alive while standing before a bed that held an injured member was weak. But she did not apologize for her words, nor did she try to take them back. You bring them home, she told him. That is what counts for a leader. I never wanted to be a leader, not when the war started, he replied. When Tsunade first told me that I would take command of a squad for a mission, I asked her if we could speak alone. Once we were, I got on my hands and knees and begged her to reconsider the idea, to put someone else in charge. You begged the Hokage? You who all the history books famous state that whenever you were with Lady Tsunade, you called her Granny? He nodded. Yeah, I begged. I thought that there had to be someone else more qualified, more trained, more able to lead a squad. I was a genin in my first war. I didn't think that I would be able to make the right choices. I thought that I would get everyone killed. I told all of this to Tsunade. What did she say? That was a moment that he wasn't going to forget any time soon. At first, she told me flat out that my request was refused. I didn't move from my spot on the ground and begged her to do it. She told me to get out of the office and get to work. I stayed in that spot waiting, hoping for her to change her mind and put someone else in charge. If she had kicked me out of the room, I would have walked right back in and continued my plea. Did she kick you out? No, she didn't. She got out of her chair, walked around the desk, got me back up onto my feet, and pulled me in for a tight hug. She told me that she knew what I was going through, that during the Second Shinobi World War, Jiraiya had gone through the same kind of worrying while she and Orochimaru had thought that they were ready. It turned out that he was the best leader out of the three of them, and she knew that I would be just the same. Oh. Oh my, she said. What else could she say? Yeah, he agreed. What else can you say to that? Nothing comes to mind. Nothing came to mind from either. So I had no choice but to accept her command. The mission was a success and I didn't get anyone killed. He grimaced. Unfortunately, that's also when the suicide wagon was invented. Since she knew about the suicide wagon, she chose not to comment. Do you miss Jiraiya? She asked him. He looked at her with slight disbelief. Of course, I miss him. I miss them all. He would gladly sacrifice all of his chakra just for the chance to travel back in time and see them all again. I gathered that, she acknowledged, but Jiraiya would have been your first personal loss. That one always manages to stick with you. He thought about Haku and Zabuza's death, back on that bridge. They might have been the first deaths he had witnessed, but Jiraiya's death was something that had hit closer to home, and it was made worse by the fact that there was no body found, not even after he had been sealed away. Yeah, it did, he admitted. Would you be surprised if I told you he had descendants? What? He had descendants. He blinked once, then twice. He what? He couldn't help but ask. Kurama rolled his eyes. Gaki, you're repeating yourself? And really, are you that shocked? In hindsight, he shouldn't be surprised. He took a moment to stop and breathe, getting back into a semblance of control. Once he was certain that he was there, he looked back at the doctor. Sorry for the outburst. She smiled at him. Trust me, Commander, she said reassuring. That had to be the mildest outburst I've seen yet. But were you really surprised by that news? I know I shouldn't be, considering his reputation. But it had taken me a while to figure out that he actually did sleep with women. Before that, I had assumed that every woman he tried flirting with would disregard him or just punch him on instinct. Kami knew he had seen Tsunade do it to him enough times. So, you never met any of his children? He shook his head. No. I don't think he even knew that they existed. He did. The history books write that each of the 73 children he had sired had met him at least once before he died in Amigakure. Some of them would have only been babies and not remembered it, but their mothers did. I expect they would, he said almost absently before latching on to a single detail. Wait, 73 kids? He was a father to 73 kids. Yes, she said with a nod. It was quite the record in its time. Granted, this wasn't done all in 1 year. It was spread out throughout his life, starting when he was in his 30s. Naruto couldn't believe it. He simply could not believe it. That super pervert had been sleeping around for that long and I never knew about it. He couldn't help but ask himself. And you thought that he was just peeping on the women in the bathhouses, Kurama told him, very amused by how his Jinchuriki had reacted. Shikaka said, you gotta wonder if he was any good or not. Oh, gross. I did not need that image in my head, Shikako. Naruto shouted at him as he tried to purge the thought of his teacher in bed with a woman. That was going to give him nightmares, he just knew it. It had to be asked? No, it didn't. Well, he had 73 children, Isabu spoke, thinking it over. I would have to say that makes him a good lover. He could have paid for some of those women. Kurama shook his head. Never would have happened. Jiraiya might have been a complete and utter luck, but the only time he paid a woman was either for services to his spy ring or to accompany him for a night of drinking. Even then he respected them. Please stop talking about it now, Naruto all but begged the 9 of them. To try and distract the conversation, he kept talking to Dr. Chukwas. What happened to them all? It was Lady Tsunade who discovered them after the reforging, she began. She got a little tipsy one night and decided to wander around the streets. When she came upon a merchant's stand from outside the village, she saw a young man helping his mother sell the wares. She thought she was seeing Jiraiya again, back in their prime. He looked like him? The spitting image apparently, except that he had his mother's eyes. She didn't see that and demanded how he had come back to life. He got nervous and the mother ordered her away, which she ignored. The ANBU ended up having to drag her away from the stand. He winced at the thought. Ooh, not a good thing. To be dragged away by your own ANBU in the middle of the street was embarrassing. He hoped for her sake that she didn't remember the details completely. Indeed, she agreed. Was that it? No. The next morning, when Lady Tsunade was sober again, she had the merchant and her son brought to her. The details of that meeting aren't exact, but what we do know is that Tsunade apologized for what she had done. The son was revealed to be Jiraiya's, and she sent out an order to Konoha Chunin to track down and bring the rest of his children to the village. The descendants still live there as a clan. You'd like them. That struck him as odd. Did she think that just because they came from Jiraiya that he would automatically like them? Why's that? He asked her before a frown wrinkled his face. They're not all super perverts, are they? One had been bad enough. He didn't need a whole clan. Not that I am aware, but they have honed your Oiroku no Jutsu to such an extent that they are considered the masters of it. Good Kami save me, Kurama groaned, clasping his eyes with his paw. That was something I didn't need to hear. Naruto wasn't the same reaction. He was actually more intrigued. Really? He asked Dr. Chukwas. Yes, really, she replied. I had a friend once in medical school from that clan. She kept transforming into a man to help me understand it better. Oh. That was something he didn't expect to hear, and he was certain that it showed on his face. She saw the surprise and smiled. I take it you never thought of transforming into a beautiful man when you used it? He shook his head. No, I was more focused getting the men caught off guard. When I did get around to thinking about using it on women, Kurama refused to let me do it in peace, and the others kept telling me if I wanted to stop the ladies dead in their tracks, all I'd have to do was take off my shirt. A bitter, but also nostalgic chuckle escaped his lips. Being the thick-headed dope that I was, I didn't really figure out what they were talking about until the village had that wet t-shirt contest, and even then, I didn't get the full gist of it. That's because you ran like a rabbit once you realized that the women were eyeing you like you were a piece of prime meat, Kurama reminded him. I'm fairly certain more than a few of them had been handsy when you left your apartment after that. Can we not talk about that? I still embarrassed of that day. He was just glad that his doctor wasn't drooling at what he just described to her. That would have been weird. Commander? Spoke Joker over the intercom. Thank you, Kami, he said in relief at the chance for a distraction. What's up, Joker? Are you busy? He sounded nervous and a little on edge. Not really, what's up? Well, he drew out the word like he was trying to either find the right words or stall. Naruto would have given him an eyeful if they were in the same space. Instead, he just opted for a no-nonsense voice. Joker, what's going on? It seems that Ruko and Miranda are in the middle of a disagreement in Miranda's office, he finally told him. And the saga of Ruko and Miranda goes on, Sun declared in a solemn voice. You were saying something about thanking Kami? Komi asked his Jinchuriki, humor seeping into his voice. Naruto scowled inwardly at them. Shut up, the lot of you, he told them. Hey! Shikaka protested. Matatabi was just as offended. We didn't say anything. I know. I'm preventing you from saying anything ahead of time. Commander, can you head it off before they tear out a bulkhead? Joker asked him, bringing him out of his own head. Yeah, I'll take care of it. Thanks for letting me know, Joker. Take pictures. The intercom went dead before the blonde could say anything back. Sorry, he apologized to Dr. Chukwas. Don't be, she told him as he went for the door. I'll let you know how Quan Misley turns out. Thanks. He left the med bay and headed for Miranda's office. He was glad that they were on the same level. It cut time getting there and would ensure that less damage would be inflicted. The first thing he heard as he approached the door, and it opened, was Ruko shouting, "Touch me and I'll smear the walls with you, bitch," as she threw a chair with her biotics at Miranda. She dodged the chair with ease and eyed the blonde woman coolly. Alright, that's enough, he said, getting in between the two of them. Miranda, you're supposed to be in the med bay recuperating. I am perfectly fine, she retorted. I don't need to waste time in the medical bay. You can't say anything unless you want to be known as a hypocrite, Kurama told him. He knew that. He also knew that she knew of his track record in regards to hospitals. Hell, he was all but certain it had been public knowledge when he wasn't around. He looked over at Ruko. What are you doing up here anyway? He asked her. You usually stay down in the engines. Fitting, Miranda remarked coldly. It's where she belongs. I'm going to kill you! Ruko shouted at her. Her biotics flared red and she looked ready to attack again. But her brother stood in her way and he looked like he wasn't going to move anytime soon. Get out of the way, Naruto. You put that biotic power out, now, he ordered. He waited until she did and asked her again, what are you doing up here? I came up here to see how she was doing, she all but spat as she glared daggers at Miranda. When the doc told she was already gone, I got concerned. I went to go see her, but she decided to be her usual frigid bitch self. I didn't need your concern, Miranda told her. Not when there's work to be done. I was trying to be nice. You're the one who told me to fuck off. And that's what led to the fight? Naruto asked. No, it was more than that, his sister said, still glaring. The cheerleader wouldn't admit what the Akatsuki did to me was wrong when it came up. You brought it up all by yourself, she retorted, folding her arms. It wasn't the Akatsuki. Not really. But clearly you were a mistake. Perhaps it should have been Alpha who got away free instead of you. Screw you. She got around Naruto and got in close to her face, her lips peeled back into a snarl. You have no idea what they put me through. She brought a finger up and tapped her on the nose. Maybe it's time I showed you. Get that finger out of my face, Miranda told her. Why should I? The finger stayed there and tapped her on the nose again. I said get it out of my face. No. What are you going to do about it? Whine and complain that it's somebody else's fault, not yours? That seems to be your favorite tactic. Get it out of my face, now. Make me. Naruto got between them and pulled them apart. Okay, that's it, he said to them both, holding them both by their hands. I've had it with the two of you dancing around the subject. Ruko looked at him, her anger clouding the reason she was here. What the hell are you talking about? She demanded. Even though she didn't agree verbally, the look on Miranda's face was all that was needed. There is no subject that we are. Shut up, the both of you, he told them. If you're not going to do anything about it, I will. The Kyuubi knew instantly what he was planning to do and groaned. You're doing that again? Why? Why are you doing it? You got a better idea? The blonde shinobi asked him. Let them fight it out. Yeah, in the middle of a ship, he replied with dry sarcasm. Brilliant idea there, furball. You'll have to forgive me if I don't go for it instantly. I was already got in the middle of an exploding ship. I don't want to repeat the process. The two women looked at him like he had lost his mind, even more so when he started dragging them towards the door. Hey, the fuck are you doing, Naruto? Ruko demanded, trying to pull herself free of his grip. Miranda did the same, but his grip was like an iron vice. There was no escaping it. Commander, let me go, she ordered him. No. He pulled them out of the office and all but frog marched them to the elevator. The crew members that were there watched this happen but didn't say anything. If they did, it was quite likely that they would get their asses kicked by one, if not all three of them. Ruko and Miranda also wondered what was going on. When they got into the elevator and the door closed, Miranda dared to speak. Commander, hush, he told her without preamble, cutting her off. Sir, I said hush. In a quick motion, he let go of her hand, hit the button for the deck he wanted, and grabbed hold of her again before she could do anything. Ruko looked at the button he pushed. Why are we? Hush. Oh come, I said hush. What the fuck? She demanded as the elevator stopped and the door opened. You can't keep telling us to hush. Yes, I can. Now move it. He walked the short distance from the elevator to his cabin's door. Once it opened, he pushed them in. They stumbled as they were pushed but recovered and looked back at him. Commander, what is going on? Miranda demanded, sounding very agitated. I'm locking you in my cabin, he told her, folding his arms across his chest. Stupid brother says what now? Ruko asked with a look of surprise and outrage. You heard me. Yeah, I heard you. But you're still not making any sense. Then allow me to completely and utterly blunt. The two of you are going to stay in this cabin until you've both figured out whatever it is that's going on between you. You're not going to step out until it's resolved. Are you? Aha! He snapped, holding his hand out in front of her. I don't want to hear it. Miranda looked like she was about to blow her top. Commander, this is completely. Miranda, at this point, I don't care what it seems like to you. You have ample opportunity to deal with this yourselves. But since you're being too pig-headed about it, you've forced me to do this. Edi, close and lock the door. She snapped her head upwards. Edi, don't you dare! Whatever she was going to say next got off when the door snapped closed and glowed red. Disregard any orders to open the door from inside that room, he continued. Of course, Commander, Edi replied. He banged on the door loudly. Get to it! Was that last part really necessary? Isaba asked him as he turned around and walked away. Yes, he replied, getting in the elevator. All of a sudden, he was glad he had talked to Morden before going to the medbay. When the elevator opened, he almost ran into Samara. Whoa, sorry about that, he told her as he backed up. There is no need to apologize, Commander, she replied smoothly. We did not run into each other nor did we cause one another to fall. Everything is quite all right. Okay, I'll be on my way then. Actually, Commander, she said, stepping alongside him as he got out of the elevator. I was hoping to speak with you for a moment. Sure. What's up? You wanna spar again? A slight twitch of her lips could have been seen as a small smile. I believe that your pilot has threatened to throw me out an airlock if I ever tear up my baby, as he put it. Guess it seems like the story of our first meeting got around to the crew. It would appear so. Ah, well, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. Nothing we can do about it now. What do you want to talk about then? Have you seen Ruko? She is late to her lesson, something that I have tried to make sure she does not do. You're on your own for this one, Gyuki declared. Yeah, we've seen how frightened Ruko looks when she realizes that she's about to be late, Sun agreed. Have fun with this. He mentally rolled his eyes at them. He didn't think that Samara would be that dangerous if it came to lateness. But still, he had to be upfront with her. Sorry, that was my fault. She arched an eyebrow at him. And why is it your fault? She and Miranda are having issues, so I locked them in my cabin until they figured it out. She looked at him for a long second, completely silent. He didn't know what it was trying to find from looking at him that way, but there wasn't really anything he could do about it. Finally, she nodded and said, I see. You do? Yes. I had known love before. Oh. He paused for a moment, trying to figure out what exactly to say in reply. Probably not that kind of love, he finally said. Komi groaned at those words. Naruto, you're talking to an Asari. I think it's safe to say that she knows all kinds of love out there. The Justicar just smiled. I'm sure that I have. The sight of the two of them is quite obvious. See? I heard it the first time. No need to beat it over my head, he told the Nanabai. Right, sorry, he apologized to Samara. She waved it away. Think nothing of it. How is Ruko's training coming along, anyway? He asked, curious to know. He walked away from the elevator and headed for the barroom, wanting to relax a little bit. It comes along well. She paused and her face took on an expression that looked both annoyed and thoughtful. She is one of the more unique pupils I have taught. To him, unique was a word that could be one thing or another. It could either be good or bad, as also having varying degrees to it. What does that mean to you? At first glance, she is a stubborn who does not seem to understand the principles of biotics I try to impart to her, often swearing to a high degree in frustration. But once she is shown the practice, she takes to it like a fish to water, becoming proficient in a matter of hours and often trying to make variations of the technique. To that, he could only laugh. It wasn't a surprise to him. Don't worry, Samara, he assured her as they neared the door. That's something you're going to have to get used to. I already am beginning to do so. But you do not seem to be surprised by it. Why? She's my clone, so she's me. She learns the same way I do. She regarded him with a cool look of curiosity with a slight confused tinge to it. Could you explain that? Sure. I'll be perfectly honest with you, Samara. I'm not much of a thinker. He waited a beat for the snarky comment from the furball. But he heard nothing, so he kept on talking. I was never much for the theory part of learning, so all the teaching in the academy pretty much flew over my head. But if you showed me how to do something and then had me do it, I'd figure it out. Not right away, but I'd figured it out. She listened attentively to his explanation as they walked through the door. The bar was empty, so she walked to the bar and poured herself a drink. I see, she finally told him. I do believe that this is the first time I've heard of such a thing. He sat down at the bar. Really? He asked her. Have you ever taken on a human pupil? No, she admitted with a shake of her head. The few pupils that I have taken were Asari who wished to become Justicars. Ruko is the first human I have taken under my wing. He took a glass and raised it. Pour me? She poured him some of her drink, and he took a sip. It wasn't sake or any other kind of drink he had had before. It was kind of fruity, but not any kind of fruit that he had before, and it also had a very good kick to it. You should talk to her about the file, Sun told him. He paused, looking at the glass for a moment. Sun had a point. But if he was honest, he didn't want Samara on his team. She was just doing fine on the ship, teaching Ruko. Still, he respected her, and it was worth talking to her. Samara, what do you know about the mission that we're on? She took a sip of her own drink. I know that you, your ship, your crew, and your team are engaged in a silent war on the side of the Akatsuki against the tribe of Athame. That is enough for me. And what if I told you that our mission changed? That now we're going to go up against the collectors? It still would not change a thing. It would be enough for me. You're not curious? She looked him straight in the eye and spoke with utter seriousness. When you live by a code that compels you to harsh action, you learn the damages of curiosity. If I must kill a man because he has done wrong, do I really wish to know that he is a devoted father? Ooh, head-scratcher, Saiken declared. Shikaka shook his head. Not really. Naruto agreed with the Tanuki. Not with the question itself, but where he was going with it. He told the Justicar. I knew a few shinobi who'd call you an idiot for ignoring a piece of critical information. She put her glass down on the counter and looked at him steadily. He raised his hand up quickly. I said I knew, not me personally. But what would you do? She asked him. He looked down at the glass in his hand. If it was me, I would learn the fact that the man had a daughter, but I would pray to Kami that I would not have to use it. The look remained steady, but she seemed a little less dangerous now. You would learn the fact and yet restrain yourself from using it until you have no other option? It was how I was taught. So, you have assassinated many people then? He gave her a long look. Are you going to come after me if I say yes? She shook her head briefly. I will not. I was not there to witness those acts and therefore, I would not be able to give them justice. I see. Well, in any case, you can relax? I didn't assassinate anyone, I just a lot of observation missions. That is not the same thing. It's the next step. Observation is learning all that you can about your target. Assassination is taking that knowledge and applying to the best outcome, he recited with ease. How to arrive at that outcome is your making. That sounds like a tenet one must learn and know fully, she remarked. Oh yeah, but it wasn't something I learned from the academy. I got from Jiraiya. He paused at the mention of his old sensei and thought of something that was a little off track. Would you have killed him if you had met him? She took a small sip of her drink, her lips quickening slightly. I believe that it is the first time someone has asked me that question in regards to Jiraiya. It was obvious that she had known about the Toad Sage. It seemed like every Asari knew of the man and his books. But before now, he had never asked an Asari that question. Then again, none of those Asari had been a Justicar. You didn't answer my question. Does it matter? She asked. The man has long been dead. To talk about it would not do anything worthwhile. Hey, that guy was my sensei. I do not rebuke that, she replied coolly. I only said that answering if I would have killed him if I had met him would be pointless. He took another drink from his cup. When it was empty, he reached for the bottle to refill it himself. Samara stopped his hand with a gentle brush of hers and took the bottle herself. He watched quietly as she filled his glass again. I can do that myself, you know, he told her as she put the bottle back. As I am standing behind the counter, I am the host. Since I am the host, it is right for me pour your drink, she said. That's a little weird, Saken remarked. You said it, Gyuki agreed. I wonder where she gets it, Matatabi said questioningly. Do you think it's from this code all the Justicars follow? Might be, Kurama acknowledged. There's one way to find out. Naruto, he started. No need to tell me what to do, Kurama, the shinobi replied. I'm already on it. He could admit to being curious about the Asari Justicar. He might have read a few passages about them back on Thesha, but it never hurt to ask one of them to their faces. Can you tell me about the Justicars, Samara? He asked her outright. She didn't pause as she drank from her cup. Only when it pulled away from her lips then she said, of course. She set it down and began to explain. We hold a unique place in Asari culture. Justicars are from another era. He snorted a little at that. So am I. Commander, you asked to explain what the Justicars are. I assumed that would be without interruptions. Again, her facial expression didn't change, but he got the impression that she would be exasperated if he kept it up. Right, sorry, he apologized straight away. Continue on. Thank you. Tell me about your code. That seemed like as good a place as any to start. It is 5,000 sutras, and covers every situation one can encounter. I have memorized every word. There is only the code. That sounded like a prayer if he had ever heard one. But he knew that there had to be a few things out there that the code could not cover. What about the times when you're faced with a situation that forces you to make a judgment that you're not going to like? I will do as the code instructs. What if the code doesn't cover it? She looked him right in the eye. Commander, in all my time as a Justicar, not once have I been in a situation that the code had not written for. What about mercy then? As he talked to her and learned about this code of hers, he came to the conclusion that if she had been the one to face pain, she would have executed Nagato without a second thought. Surely you must know that sometimes it's better to give mercy than justice? The code does not exist to bring spiritual enlightenment. Its purpose is to punish the wicked and protect the innocent. That was great and all, but he saw a problem with it. That's easier said than done. Indeed, she acknowledged. You know, people seem genuinely nervous around you, he noted, remembering how Ruko hid behind his back when they met her on Ilium. But they also respect you. What's with the conflicting emotions? It's not surprising. We are respected in fear, like we're supposed to be. Young Asari grow up watching vids about our adventures. Pure fiction, of course, she added as an afterthought. But there is a reason for their fear. In this age, people see shades of gray everywhere. The code of the Justicars is black and white. I might seem a hero to many, but I would kill them all if I had to. That's harsh, he said. It is the code. He wasn't going to argue that point with her, not yet. To him, the code seemed a bit archaic, but it was her way of life. Just how many Justicars are there in the galaxy? Only a few, she answered, taking a small sip of her drink. Why is that? Most Asari don't have the stomach for it or something? From what he's seen of Asari in combat, they've got no problems getting into them. Of course, they always seemed a bit heavy on the biotics to him. That is a way of seeing things. most Asari wish to make the sacrifices necessary to become one of us. And the training has a high causality rate. Of the few pupils I have taught, even fewer have lived to become Justicars. He eyed her in complete seriousness. You're not planning on killing Ruko, are you? Do not worry, Commander. I am not training her to be a Justicar, she assured him before getting back to what they were talking about. It is a life of constant danger. That is why throughout the galaxy, there is only a few of us at any time. Geez, why would anyone want to be a Justicar then? Why did you want to become a shinobi? She asked after a paused moment. He took the pause and extended it even further. I wanted to prove to everyone I wasn't what they thought I was, he finally said. It was the truth, just without the details. He knew that she already knew the details. It was a personal matter, not one born of duty. She asked. He shrugged his shoulders and said 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Sure, he initially wanted to become Hokage so people could respect him. But there was also a fact that he was an orphan growing up in a village of shinobi. He couldn't think of any other life he might have taken. I see. Again, she paused before saying, for myself, it's a deeply personal matter. Sometimes the most brutal path is the only honest one. That sounded like something he shouldn't pry into. Okay, what do you think about the Justicar personally? I would say that the closet human equivalent is a knight-errant, in your medieval lore. If he hadn't done that big amount of reading on Thesha, he had no clue what that meant. But because he did, he knew that a knight was a warrior of standing in the frontier during the time of the Iron Kingdom. When the kingdom became the Empire, the title became more a formality than an actual thing. That's the frontier. I'm from the elemental countries. Then perhaps being compared to a samurai would be a better description. He was a little surprised by that. I know you read up on me, but you also read up on the rest of us? Don't act so surprised, Kurama rebuked him. She's a professional. She knows what she needs to do. She nodded. When I knew I must leave Asari space again, I studied the history and morals of new species. When I was a maiden wandering the galaxy, humans had not yet arrived. And what do you think about humans? You are more individualistic than any other species I have encountered. If 3 humans are in a room, there will be 6 options. I like your species. I am curious to see what you will do. Thanks, I think. He considered where the conversation could go from there. A thought popped into his head that had him considering instantly. Samara, do you mind if I pose what possibly could be a difficult question to you? I welcome it. I have to give you fair warning, it's a question that is liable to drag you out of the black and white of the code and into the real world of gray. She gave him a look that almost seemed amused. Commander, I am sure I will be able to answer your question within the bounds of the code. All right, I warned you. Since you read up on me and humanity, I'm assuming that you read up on people I came in contact with. Yes. So, you read up on Itachi Uchiha? She nodded. I did. All right. Considering all that you know of him, what would you have done if you had encountered him? She didn't answer right away. She thought for a long time about it. And as she thought, he sat there, waiting for her answer. It would be interesting to see what she had to say. Since she was committed to dispensing justice onto the wicked, it was likely that she would have just killed Itachi outright. But the other side of the coin, Itachi had committed his massacre whilst under orders and in order to protect the village. That was what he thought made her pause. Why would you want to ask her that kind of question? Gyuki asked him. I want to see what her answer will be. And if it's something that you don't like? There's nothing I can do about that. Itachi's been dead for some time now. I believe, Samara began to answer, that it would depend on the time in his life that I had met him. Well? I'm not disappointed, Gyuki, he told the Hachibi. In fact, he was a little curious about her answer. What makes you say that? It is always easier to see things in hindsight, Commander. The past is much clearer. If I was to judge Itachi Uchiha, it would depend on when I would meet him. If I had met him after the Uchiha clan was massacred, I would have killed him where he stood. If I had learned that he had been put under orders to do so, I would have carried out justice upon the people that had given him the order. That's fair enough, he conceded. He took a sip of his drink, finishing it off. That is if you were able to beat him at all, of course. She eyed him. That sounded like a challenge. Commander, do you doubt my combat skills? Not at all, Samara, he replied. He had sparred with her, after all. I know that you are skilled and trained to have gotten where you are now. But I still think that you need a good amount of luck going up against Itachi Uchiha. I do not believe in luck. I believe in planning, application, and execution. If I was to go after him, he would die. If it had been anyone else, he would have said they were arrogant. On Samara, it was confidence. Still, he felt like she needed the facts. Tell me, Samara, do you know everything about the Uchiha clan's Sharingan? He asked her, matching her look. She shook her head. No, I only know what the Alliance has given the Council. And you have only yourself to blame for letting the Council know that they didn't get everything, Kurama told his Jinchuriki. When did that become a bad thing? Wait a minute. We weren't even talking about that. I was bringing it up in case you ever tried to deny it later on. Stop that, I'm trying to focus here, he told the fox before turning his attention back to Justicar on the other side of the bar. Samara, I will be perfectly honest with you. I know all the secrets of the Sharingan, whether it was from combat or an explanation from Sasuke. I even know how to fight against it without making direct eye contact, thanks to Might Guy. But even having both of those things in my arsenal, I would be hesitant to go up against Itachi Uchiha in actual combat. I don't think he ever really lost a fight. He did lose one, against his brother, she reminded him. It cost him his life. He smirked a little bit. You've read the books. I heard it from Sasuke. Both of them say that two of them fought each other. Sasuke never said he won the fight. Itachi had a sickness that he refused to have cured. That was what finally killed him. She said, drinking a sip from her glass. You sound almost impressed with the man. There's nothing almost about it. I was impressed by Itachi Uchiha, and I was scared of him. Before the truth was revealed, he was known as one of the greatest traitors to the village, right up there with Orochimaru. Thinking back on it, he wondered why he had never picked up on it when he was a genin. He put it down to his being obtuse, the fact that people were still leery of him, and that Sasuke was his teammate, so no one wanted to bring up bad memories. But on account of that, he could say that he wasn't the only one who had been left in the dark. That is not a measuring stick you need to use, Kurama told him in slight chastisement. No one would tell the new genin about Itachi, he replied. We only knew that Sasuke's clan had been wiped out. We didn't know that it was his brother who did it. Still, comparing yourself to what others had known about the situation is not something I will condone. So stop while you can. As you say, Mom, he said with a slight mocking tone. Even when the truth was leaked out, he continued to explain to Samara, there were still old hardliners who thought that Itachi was a traitor, and it was a story to pretty him up and get Sasuke back on the side of the villages. Essentially, they spat on his name. We always had to make sure Sasuke never heard those guys because he would always come to his brother's defense by trying to kill them in broad daylight. That would have been the right thing to do, she replied. Coming to the defense of his brother's memory and legacy is justified. Saying that is one thing, actually doing it is another. Besides, the village and the shinobi themselves were still concerned about whether or not Sasuke would turn traitor again. Having him murder other shinobi would not have turned out well. And we needed every man on those battlefields. You asked me about Itachi, a man compared to another great traitor, but you don't ask about Orochimaru. That's because I would have had no problem with you killing Orochimaru. I did not like that guy, he declared. You know what? I would go even so far as to say I would have liked to kill him myself. Whoa, Koko said in surprise. That's a step for you, Naruto. I know. Samara looked at him still. If that is what you felt, why didn't you follow through? The man had committed heinous crimes. She had read much on the first Snake Sage, as well as his teammates. She would have killed him the instant she had learned about his crimes. Again, we needed every man on the battlefield. I never spoke it aloud because of that. We got along well enough during the war, but we were never friends. He paused for a moment, thinking about how the man lived and died during the war. The only time I ever felt any kind of sympathy for him was when he was dying and holding his granddaughter to his chest. Could you please just cut through the bullshit and talk to her about what the elusive man gave you? Shikaka demanded. He was a little surprised that it was the Tanuki who was losing his temper with him. What's wrong with a little conversation? There's a little conversation and then there's you doing the runaround. So just get to it already. Matatabi nodded. You should get to it already, Naruto. There's no real point in delaying the conversation. All right, he said. You guys are worse than Kurama sometimes. I'd protest that, but it's true, the fox said. Samara, there's something serious we should talk about, he said to the Justicar. Remember I asked about the mission changing around? Yes, I do, she replied. Well, the mission's changed around. I see. What has changed about it? He gave her a look. Really? He asked. After asking you that kind of question, that's what you say? I will concede that it is obvious. But I would still like to hear it from your own mouth. He almost growled in agitation but refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead of going after the tribe, my team is changing the objective to going after the collectors. The elusive man sent me a few dossiers for people to add to the team. She listened attentively as he explained. What does this have to do with me? You're on one of the dossiers. I see. If you wish to have me on your team, I will have to swear to you the third oath of subsumation. He had no idea what that was, but he shook his head rapidly. No, there's no need for any kind of oaths. Commander, I must swear this oath to you if you wish to have me be a part of your time. That's just the thing, Samara. I don't want you on the team. She went completely still, almost becoming a statue with the way she had frozen. She put the glass in her hand on the counter and pushed it away. Then she looked him right in the eye. Commander, do you doubt my abilities in a fight? He did his best not to burst out laughing or even snicker. After that conversation? He asked her. Come on, Samara. I remember our spar on Thesha. There's no way I could doubt your fighting skills. Then why is it you are refusing to let me join you on your mission? Because I feel like it would be dishonest of me, almost like I conned you into it. I brought you onto the ship because you wanted to train Ruko in biotics. That was our understanding. To bring you onto the team feels a little wrong to me. He scratched the back of his head somewhat embarrassedly. Look, I know it sounds a little foolish and I know I might look a bit like an idiot for telling you this now. But it doesn't sit right with me for having you do something for me when that wasn't the original intention. She was still standing behind the counter when he finished. She hadn't moved from the spot. Very well, she said. I accept your reasoning. You do? He asked, a little surprised. I do, she said, not sounding at all irritated by his obvious question. You are right. You allowed me to come aboard as a teacher, not as a warrior. To have me be the latter because another man wills it would be unjust. He breathed in relief. Thanks for letting me know about that, Samara. Look, if you're personally disappointed about the refusal, I'll make it up to you. If you ever need any kind of help, just let me know and I give you a hand. She inclined her head a little. I will take it in consideration. Good to hear. He put the glass back down on the counter and hopped down from the stool. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go train Grunt some more. I wish you safe health, she told him as he walked out the door. Thanks. I might need it. Good thing you thanked Samara for that safe health, Kurama commented idly while his Jinchuriki flew backwards and hit the bulkhead with a hard thump. I don't think you'd be kicking around so much if you hadn't. I'd asked if you had any faith in me, but I doubt it right now too, Naruto replied as he pulled himself up from the ground. His back was really hurting from that landing, and he just knew it would be like that for the next couple of hours. In any case, you might want to move. He's charging again. Yeah, I see that, think. He threw himself out of the way as Grunt came charging at him with a roar. The Krogan slammed into the wall, but that didn't even slow him down. For the love of Kami, what's with him now? How much have you pissed him off lately? Saiken asked him. He stepped back away from his student's wild swings. Not recently, he answered, blocking one of those swings and got a punch in. It didn't even slow the Krogan down. And that's not a good measuring stick, Gyuki remarked. A small thing can set Grunt off. He attacked Naruto as he walked through the door, Sun pointed out. So unless he didn't like how he smelt, I'd say that nothing set him off this time. Excuse me, working here, save the curiosity for later. He ducked low to avoid the incoming haymaker. He followed the momentum downward into a roll, moving behind Grunt. He came out of it, turned around, and leapt onto his student's back. His arms looped around the Krogan's neck and he held on tight. Grunt's hands instantly shot upwards and dug into his arms, trying to get free. They were strong, like they should have been, but Naruto was tough. It would take more than just strong hands to pry him off. Grunt, calm down, he ordered his student. I don't think he can hear you, Kurama told him. I noticed. He held on, slowly to get the oxygen cut off so Grunt would get weaker. Grunt fought against his lock. When his hands didn't work alone, he took to trying to shake him off. The blonde's body started swinging through the air, but his lock kept him attached. I said, "Calm down, Grunt." Again, I don't think. The fox stopped when he realized that Grunt was turning around, so he faced the door, but his back was aimed at a wall. "Never mind, he can hear you." Naruto looked back at the wall he was being directed and could only think, oh hell. Grunt roared again and backpedaled to the wall. But the shinobi reached it first, swinging his legs up to touch it. They bent, absorbing the contact. Then he pushed off, swinging his body up and over, bringing Grunt down to the ground. They stayed for the moment, with him holding his student face first on the ground. Grunt kept struggling, trying to get free, but Naruto kept holding him down. "I'm not letting go until you calm the fuck down, Grunt," he said, keeping his grip tight. "By the way, does this remind you of anything?" the fox asked him. "Yeah, I know it's like me fighting Rex. The only difference is that I'm not getting thrown around like a rag doll." "So you admit that you were having your ass handed to you?" "I did not say that. I said that I wasn't getting thrown around like a rag doll. There's a difference." "I think Grunt's finally stopped struggling," Isabu chimed in. "Just letting you know." Naruto looked down at his student. He did seem to be struggling less now, but it remained to be seen how much. "You calmed down yet, Grunt?" he asked the Krogan. He didn't get an answer, but his student went still. I think you might have just knocked him unconscious," Sun noted. "No, he's not there yet. But if it happens again, I'm going to make sure he does," he replied. Grunt kicked the floor once for yes, twice for no. "Do you understand?" He waited a beat, and it paid off. Grunt's left foot rose up and kicked the floor. "Good. Now you calm down yet?" He got another kick. "All right, I'm going to let go and get off you. You try to attack me, you'll be out for the count this time, got it?" He got another kick. He released his grip and got off Grunt, stepping away to a safe distance. From there, he watched as his student got back onto his own feet and stood up. He held there, taking the moment to breathe in deeply. Once he was good, he looked at the human. "Thank you, Sensei," he said. Naruto fixed him with a look. "I know that we're prone to arguing and fighting, Grunt. But that usually happens after I try getting a lesson through your head." "I know," the Krogan said shortly, looking at everything that wasn't him. Naruto watched his student carefully. What he said was true, they both knew it. If he came out of a lesson without some part of his body in any kind of pain, that would have been a complete and utter surprise. It seemed like every lesson was spent more in arguing and fighting than actual learning. "That you can't blame on him," Gyuki told him. "That's on you." He couldn't wave that away because it was true. He was used to learning at a human level, but what Grunt could do with his churka was much lower than that. What he had been able to understand after a few missteps, Grunt just couldn't and would get angry, hence the arguing and the fighting. Naruto had long come to the conclusion that his student wouldn't do much in the way of chakra. Heck, if he was able to do the Academy 3, that would be impressive. But he would do the best he could. Yet, watching his student pace around like an animal trying not to attack everything in sight, made him wonder what was going on with him. "You got something to say, Grunt?" he asked. The Krogan whipped his head at him, his eyes screaming that he wanted to do something bad. "Something," he started to say in a growl. He stopped himself and started again. "Something is wrong, Sensei. I feel wrong. Tense. I just want to kill something. With my hands," he added. "You always have that feeling," he retorted. "If you didn't have a gun in your hands during a fight, you'd go straight for the fists. This is different. It's more so than usual, like it's not my choice." He stalked his way over to the nearby window that looked down to the cargo deck. "Like I just want, I don't know." Without warning, he slammed his head against the glass, cracking it. Naruto didn't react. He was used to such things. Grunt pulled his head away and marched back to him. "See? Why do that? What's wrong? Ulker didn't leave you anything about this?" he asked. He knew that old Krogan warlord had imprinted many things onto Grunt. If whatever this was wasn't imprinted, there was cause for concern. His student shook his head. "I see pictures of old battles, voices of warlords. But this is a blood haze in my head. So what are you going to do about it?" He went still for a moment. "I want control." He started pacing again. "When we're fighting, moving, I focus. But here, my blood screams, my plates itch, and even you are just noise. I'm tankborn. What is this?" I don't know, Naruto told him honestly. That is very helpful. Watch that sarcasm, grunt. He got it from you, Shikaku reminded him. So you really can't say about it. I wasn't talking to you, Shikaku. You are now. Just stop talking, Kurama told the tanuki, swatting him with one of his tails. Hey! Watch the tail. As he usually did, Naruto ignored his tenants and focused on Grunt. Why don't we ask Edi if she knows anything about? Fine, he grunted. He raised his eyes to the ceiling. Edi, I know you're listening in. Well? The Akatsuki has a number of autopsies on file, but nothing on a living Krogan, the AI answered, but nothing on a living Krogan of this age and situation. Krogan are reluctant to share medical records. I wonder why, he remarked to himself. Grunt had the answer, and was all too willing to share it. My people were defeated by doctors and labs. They will never let stuff like that leave the homeworld, Tuchenka. So, what you're saying is that we need to go to Tuchenka. He paused in pace and actually looked nervous. Wait, maybe nervous wasn't the right word. It could be uneased. Yeah, we should go there, he finally said after a long pause. Alright then, I'll go tell Joker to head for Tuchenka. Thank you, Sensei, Grunt said to him. I don't like this. Fury is my choice, not a sickness. That it is, he acknowledged. Now, let's get to the lesson. You're still going to give it? After that little episode? Asked the surprised son. I've been through worse, he replied as he sat down on the floor, crossing his legs. Grunt followed suit but couldn't bend his legs the same way. There was nothing they could do about it since they already figured out that Krogan bones were structured differently. Trust me, he has, Kurama agreed. I can vouch, Yuki added. Grunt sat down across from the blonde and folded his hands just like he had practiced. Yo, Joker, Naruto said as he walked into the cockpit. Hey, Commander, his pilot said in return, turning around and flashing a dirty look at the orb that was EBI. He noticed the look. Something going on up here? He asked Joker. We're just having an argument over personalization of my workspace, among other things. Akatsuki regulations are clear, Mr. Moro, EDI replied. Personalization does not include grease on my bridge cameras. It's just mad that all its footage of me looks like a dream sequence, he retorted. Besides, it's payback. Payback for what? Asked Naruto. This thing wanted to fire me over a joke, he said, throwing the orb a dirty look. Okay, I said that I'd flash the AI core, but I was kidding. And we'd only lose a few systems. Nosy ones, he added. To clarify, human adjustments are not actually under my authority, EDI told Naruto. Then why? Joker demanded. Why are you always picking on me? My replies were intended to provoke, though not to cause distress. Your reactions are atypical of most humans. You are interesting. So, you were joking around with him? Naruto asked the orb. Nothing in the restrictions imposed on me forbids active observation techniques. Mr. Moro's performance actually improves under duress. Joker snorted. I never figured the coming overlords would be so annoying, he said. I'm done. Alright, you two, this has to stop before you end up crashing the ship, the shinobi of the three of them said sternly. Could you just let this go? I make no promises, Joker said grudgingly. Try. In the meantime, plot a course to Tuchenka. He lost the grudging look, replacing it with surprise. We're going to the Krogan homeworld? Why? Grunt needs help. Plot the course, Joker, and inform the crew about it. All right, he said as he turned around. I'll get right on that. He reached for the intercom, and the cockpit came alive with "Oh good Kami, yes. Do it. Lick M." Just as quickly as it came, it went when Joker turned it off. Naruto stood completely still, wishing that he hadn't heard what he just did. Joker, did I just hear my sister? The pilot did not turn around to meet his gaze. Yes. And she was doing what I think she was doing? Yes. And the entire ship heard it? Yes. He covered his face in his hands and groaned. This is going to be bad. It also didn't help the fact that Shikaku was laughing his brown sandy ass off in his head. Then he remembered something. If the intercom was to be directed to a single area on the ship, Joker would do it from his console. Otherwise it would just be a general ship broadcast. That meant... Joker, were you listening in on Ruko and Miranda before I walked in here? Joker still didn't turn around to look at him. Joker. I thought they were going to just fight, he blurted out before the blonde could finish. It was EDI who summed up the situation he was in perfectly with a question. Would you like me to contact next of kin to inform them of your impending death, Mr. Moreau? Codex entry, Humanity and the Systems Alliance headband. Also known as a Hittite or a forehead protector, the headband of the shinobi is in and of itself a symbol of the shinobi, at one time showing pride in their clan, which progressed into pride in their village, and then the shinobi alliance as a whole. The components of the headband are relatively simple: a band of cloth with a metal plate attached, although that came with the formation of the hidden village system. The cloth can be done in a variety of colors and can be worn in different ways as well. But the metal plate always has the symbol of the village inscribed upon it. To wear the headband of their village was matter of pride for shinobi. Some had even seen not wearing it to be disgraceful, although there were many recorded shinobi who did not wear the headband. To have the headband taken away would often be seen as shameful to the wearer, and there are numerous records of disgraced shinobi giving their lives to regain the honor of bearing the headband. Missing nin, or rogue shinobi, who managed to take their headbands with them when they betrayed their village, were known to carve a scratch across the symbol to declare their lack of allegiance. At first there were many symbols for the different villages, but when the Shinobi Alliance was formed, the plates used from the Fourth Shinobi World War were put into mass use. The reason for this move was because the symbol of the aforementioned plate was the elemental kanji for shinobi. This stayed permanent when the Shinobi Alliance transformed into the Human Alliance. By the time the Human Alliance became the Systems Alliance, the headband had become more ceremonial than practical. In this day and age, the Alliance holds the right of giving any of its soldiers a headband to be a reward on par with being rewarded the Palladium Star or the Galactic Unit Citation. The last recipient of a headband was Rear Admiral John Grissom for pioneering early Alliance mass relay travel and for delivering the decisive blow that ended the Battle of Shanxi. However, there have been some parties lobbying for General Williams, former Uchiha, to receive a headband. Chapter 51. That's not supposed to be here. Location: the Normandy. As Miranda slowly woke up, she felt a little sore, relaxed, and absolutely fantastic. She lay against the bedsheet, completely content. One of her legs was tangled up in the sheets, but she didn't care. She was warm and safe. It felt like she could stay in that little bubble of contentment for the rest of her life. She felt the warmth move a little and heard a slight sleepy moan too. What was that? She asked herself. Her eyes opened drowsily, but once they saw Ruko all but burrowed into her side, her head resting on her chest like a pillow, they snapped wide awake. Miranda quickly looked at them both. Her arms were looped Ruko's body and vice versa. Not only was it comfortable, it felt right. Then she noticed the both of them were naked and still in the commander's private quarters. For a moment, Miranda wondered what the hell had happened. Then it all came back to her. After the commander locked them in, they had tried to go for sullen silence and staying away from each other. Ruko was the first one to crack, walking over to her and saying that they might as well talk. Miranda had said that she had nothing to say. It went downhill from there. First it was arguing, then it was followed by insulting one another, then shouting. As the fight went on, Miranda found herself getting more and more frustrated and angry with the blonde clone. When they had started shouting about everything wrong with the other, her temper had snapped. She called Ruko a maddened dog that rampaged around wherever she liked and not giving a damn about the destruction she caused or the deaths that she left behind. Ruko looked absolutely furious at those words. She stood before her and her body trembled with rage. Miranda could see the rage and still going strong on her anger, riding it like a surfer would a wave, dared the blonde to use her biotics or her gun to put her down. If you do that, she had said, then you'll just be proving me right as to how much of a mad dog you are. Ruko did a surprising thing. She leapt at her, grabbing the front of her jumpsuit. That's all I knew how to do! She screamed, her fist arching back. As the fist came towards her, Miranda had felt a moment of panic. She's actually going to do it. But the punch swung right past her and all she heard was a dull thud. For a second, she didn't know what had happened. Then she turned and saw the fist pressed hard against the bulkhead. She looked back at the blonde. She was trembling. I'm trying to be different, she said in a voice that had managed to sound both loud but quiet at the same time. I'm trying to be something else than just a mad dog. We can all change. That's what I'm trying to do. She looked at her. Damn it, why can't you do the same? Miranda stared at her, unable to answer. There was another question that hung in the air, one that she had asked without saying the words. Why can't you just love me? The brunette looked at her for the longest time, unable to answer either question. Then she noticed, with a little bit of a shock, that there were tears beginning to form in the blonde's eyes. That was when she realized the impact of what Ruko's words. She portrayed herself to be a tough hardass who could scare other people away just by glaring at them. And yet there she had been, bearing herself before Miranda, all but confessing, and revealing that she was scared that the answer would be no. That was probably what compelled her to lean forward and kiss her. It was a hesitant kiss, even more so when Ruko looked surprised at the contact. For a moment, Miranda had thought that she had been wrong. But then the surprise vanished, and she returned the kiss fervently. Her hands started to grasp at her clothes, and she took hold of her hips. She didn't remember when they had gotten to the bed, but she was certain the first round of sex had been on the office chair. Now, she was naked and in bed with the woman she had slept with the night before. And she wasn't sure how to go from there. Whenever she had sex with someone, if she needed the relief, she would usually leave the next morning. No note, no breakfast afterwards. Sometimes she didn't even wait for the morning. That had been the way she preferred it. There was no need for emotions or bonding. She didn't need them. It could have been used against her. But something was different now. She was in bed with a woman that, despite both her silent and vocal protests, she had somehow fallen for. It shouldn't have made sense or even worked. Ruko was loud, arrogant, vulgar, too open-handed with her biotics and her gun, ready to snap at anyone that even sounded stupid in her presence, and just acted like she was fury incarnate. But even as she listed those things, the brunette knew that they weren't exactly true anymore. She was beginning to calm down and think things through the heat of battle. She kept an eye out for her teammates, pulling them out of the fire if things got too close, even though she would yell at them for either then or later. If she tried to think of the blonde as just a mad dog who bit any hand that came close, all she had to do was remember how she interacted with the commander. They acted like family. She looked at Ruko, still sleeping against her chest. She looked peaceful, almost happy. Deep inside Miranda, a fear began to grow. She shouldn't be doing this. It would get her into danger, probably something that would finally get her killed. Emotion was a weakness that she couldn't afford. She had to get away. She had to get away. That last night was just a one-off. Yes, that's what she needed to do. She had to get out of the cabin. She unclasped her hands and tried to move away. She couldn't just shove Ruko off. That would wake her up and it would make things awkward. She knew that it would happen and wanted to avoid it at all costs. But the second she started moving, Ruko tightened her grip. Oh, really now? She thought in irritated despair. Ruko made a sound that was scared, distressed. Miranda heard it and froze. She looked back down at the blonde, saw the small panicked look forming on her still sleeping face. She also saw the look of silent pleading she had last night after the punch was thrown. Her heart melted again. She couldn't pull herself away. Damn you, Ruko, she cursed without any heat. She brought her arm back around the blonde in a half-hug. Don't worry, she whispered, pulling the woman a little closer. I'm still here. The worried look disappeared and the blonde looked content. She snuggled in close, her head now resting at Miranda's neck. The brunette snuck a kiss onto her forehead and got a pleased sound in response. With her free hand, she played with her locks. Ruko's hair was still a mess of a pixie cut, but it had grown long enough for her to weave her fingers through it. They lay there, on that bed, and she started to feel sleepy. The rest of the galaxy didn't exist in that moment. There, she felt content, warmth, and safety. The sudden banging on the door shocked them both out of that bubble and away from each other. Miranda almost leapt out of the bed at it, and had to remind herself that they weren't under attack, stopping the instinctive biotics before they actually formed. From the other side of the bed, she heard Ruko grumble, "The fuck you say?" My sentiments exactly, she thought to herself. Before either of them could call out, the person who had banged on the door spoke first. Are you guys awake? Both women shared a quick look of panic. It was the commander. It was the commander whose private cabin they had slept with each other. This is not good. But while she was inwardly nervous, she let her voice project her normal coolness. What makes you think that we fell asleep, Commander? She called back. You were in there all night and most of the morning. I hardly think that you spent all that time fighting with each other. That we didn't, she thought to herself, a small smile almost coming to her lips. Have you guys figured it all out? That was certainly one way of looking at it. Yes. Did you tear up the place in the process? She looked around at the cabin for the first time since last night. The commander wasn't much of a person to have things laying around on surfaces. But what he did have had been strewn across the floor wherever she and Ruko had been, trying to get to the bed. The blonde's shirt and her jumpsuit were on the couch, and she faintly remembered spending 20 minutes there before tossing a naked Ruko onto the bed. "It's not too bad," she finally replied. It was the closest to the truth that she would let it come. "It's nothing a quick cleanup will be able to fix." The smell, on the other hand, would be difficult to explain away. "All right, get out of there and come down to the conference room. We got a mission to do." She waited until she couldn't hear his footsteps anymore before daring to move from the side of the bed. She walked a little gingerly towards the bathroom. If the two of them were going to present themselves like they didn't have sex the night before, they were going to have to get cleaned up. "I'll go first," she said to Ruko without looking back at her. The bathroom door opened and there stood the shower head. She reached out for the switch, turned on, and shuddered in relief as the hot water started falling down on her. It was invigorating and it felt like she was waking up all over again. "Oh good God, this feels great," she said inside her own head, standing underneath the water. But then she felt an arm snake around her shoulder and a kiss on her neck, a kiss that sent shivers down her spine. "And just where did you think you were going?" Ruko asked in a husky purr right behind her. Her body quivered, wanting to see where the kiss would lead. But she knew where it would lead and they didn't have time for it. "Ruko," she started to say, only to get turned around so that they were face to face. Ruko kissed her again, harder and stronger this time. Her hands went to her hips on instinct, pulling her closer. The blonde agreed with a hungry growl. She brought her hand down, trailing Miranda's wet glistening skin with a light touch of her fingers. Her lips followed, leaving a series of burning but worshipful kisses down her body. When the blonde reached what she had been looking for, she found the brunette hot and wet, and it wasn't from the shower either. As the first wave of pleasure overflowed Miranda, she distantly remembered something about having to get out of the room. "We'll just have to make this quick," she told herself with the last vestiges of her control. Once that was gone, she let a moan that echoed in the water and the room. She grabbed the other woman by her hair, letting her fingers thread their way through those locks, and held her there. She didn't protest. "Oh Cammy, have mercy," Isaba said when Miranda and Ruko finally walked into the conference room. "Look at them. They're practically glowing." Naruto could see that. He could also see how close they were to each other as they walked up to the table. There was also that little smile on their lips, like they found something that amused them both. It took them a second to separate once they reached the table, moving so they were standing on opposite sides. "You think they did that so they could keep looking at each other?" Sun asked. "I don't think that either of them is that vain," Naruto replied. "You never know. Sex can be quite the changer. And would a four-tailed gorilla in my head know about sex? How?" "By watching you, of course," he replied instantly but with a victorious look on his face. "We both know that you've become quite kinky in your bedroom fun time." "He's got you there," Saiken agreed with a nod of his head. "Can we please just get back to the point on hand already?" Kurama asked, getting a little annoyed. "And stop looking so damn smug, Shikaku." "Why should I?" the Tanuki asked. The look on his face just screamed how pleased and smug he was at that moment. "I believe that I have the right to be smug, since I was proven right once again." "You want the right to be pounded into a sandy pulp? I can give you that." "Guys, knock it off," Naruto told them both. "And son, never call it that again. That just sounded wrong." The blonde looked at both his XO and his sister. "So, are you guys going to keep fighting now?" "Didn't you already ask that question?" Ruko asked back. "I asked if you figured it all out. You can still keep fighting even if you figured it out." "Ah, don't worry about it," she said, waving it off with a careless hand. Miranda nodded in agreement. "We've sorted out our differences, Commander." "I'll bet," Shikaka said with a shit-eating grin. "Hush you." He looked at the others but they didn't say anything or even smirk. He was glad to see it. For a moment, he thought that his warning would be ignored. Again, glad to hear, he told the two of them. "Now, let's get down to brass tacks. I had a talk with the elusive man last night." "Oh goody," Gurus muttered openly. Miranda gave him a sour look but Naruto kept on talking. "Trust me, Gurus. I had the exact same sentiment. But I had to talk to him to figure out what the hell happened on Horizon. He revealed to me what the collectors were, and what they were doing in the galaxy. He also told me that they are connected to the Reapers somehow. And you believe him? Eric asked. He nodded. I do. You've gotta be shitting me, Zaid grumbled. I mean Reapers? Really? He asked. The blonde shinobi gave him a long look. Say that after you've tangled with one of them, I dare you. Can't say I've done that, he retorted. There's a good chance you're going to before long. Now, he said as he turned his attention back to the rest of the table, because of this information, our goals have changed. We can forget the shadow war with the tribe. We're going after the collectors. Miranda was a little surprised by that declaration. She would have thought that they would still be on the tribe for a little while longer. But instead of asking him if he had gotten approval from the elusive man, she asked a different question. Do you think that you're strong enough to go after them? He looked over at her, aware there was some surprise in his eyes. She didn't say anything when she saw the surprise, keeping it professional. If I'm not, I'm going to have to get there fast, he finally said. We still got some ways to figure out getting through the inhibitors. Why didn't we just snag the doctor from Horizon? Musashi asked. Wouldn't have worked, Kasumi replied. She was already in council hands and we couldn't take the time to get before we got out there. There's also going to be a problem about going after the collectors, Jacob said. We've been getting reports from teams out on the field. The collectors somehow are able to follow Commander Uzumaki's chakra signature like dogs following blood. So far, there have been decoys giving them the runaround, but if we go after them ourselves, they'll be able to find us. Thank you, Jacob. I was already aware of that, Naruto told him. And it's not going to be as big a problem as you might think. He eyed his commanding officer. It's not. No. After the talk with the elusive man, I went to the lab and talked to Morden. He thinks he could come up with something that would be able to mask my signature and hide us from the collectors. Wait, he thinks? Geras asked, looking at the blonde. The Solarian was a scientist. Sure, they did a lot of thinking, but Morden always seemed to be confident about his skills. I gave him the night, Naruto replied like that was the answer to everything. He looked over at the Solarian. You come up with anything, Morden? Yes, he answered. Initial question proved easy after giving additional thought. Solution staring at me entire time. He frowned. Actually disappointed for not realizing it sooner. Must be slipping. Guilt trip later, Morden. What do you have? Quite simple. Since signature is trackable, simply get rid of signature. There was a pregnant pause as they all looked at him. They weren't quite sure what he was trying to say, since his whole speech pattern was more than odd. That's what we're trying to do, lizard brain, Ruko finally said. I thought you were supposed to be smart. From where she stood, she could reach out and thump him on the head. Maybe doing that would give his brain the jolt it needed to work probably. Naruto, on the other hand, came to a different conclusion. Morden, you're not suggesting that I voluntarily lose my chakra, are you? What? No. Would defeat purpose, Morden replied, actually sounded offended that he would say such a thing. He breathed in relief. He was worried there for a moment. I was half afraid I was going to have to string him up and hang him from the rafters as an example, he thought to himself. Okay, then what are you suggesting? Jacob's description best fits explanation of solution. If collectors are tracking by smell, remove smell. Simple. You say that, but I'm not hearing any details about what you're going to do exactly, Geras pointed out to him. He was still waiting for the answer that would prevent the collectors from pouncing on them like a predator on prey. Also simple. We'll adapt vaccine for seeker swarms to act as muffler to Commander's chakra. Should work. Should? Grunt asked in a warning growl as he stared warningly at the Solarian doctor. Naruto whipped his head to look at his student. Grunt, calm down, now, he ordered instantly. The Krogan stopped growling but continued to give Morden a suspicious look. While not as growly as him, Geras said, pointing a talon at Grunt, I share the sentiment. If the collectors are coming after Naruto, we're going to need a lot more than just should. Won't be able to give should now. Modifying vaccine as we speak. Still experimental. Won't know if it will work until tested in field. Will it be ready by the time we get to our destination? Naruto asked him. Most likely. I'll take it. He looked at the rest of the team and said, the elusive man believes that the team needs to have more members on the team. He has sent me 3 more dossiers for potential teammates. We'll be discarding one of them. Why's that? Jacob asked him. He would have thought that getting all the people they could on the team. It's Samara. I've already talked to her about it. She's agreed to the sentiment. Commander, why have you left Samara out? Miranda asked. The Justicar would certainly be useful in the fight to come. Because I brought her onto the ship for one thing and I would have been coercing her into doing something else. It just doesn't sit right with me. We could always use more biotics on the team. He gave her a look. You don't trust who we've already got? She frowned slightly. He looked over at his sister. Ruko is being trained by Samara. So her skills are becoming more honed and dangerous. I think we're going to be fine. As you say, Commander, she finally conceded. So who are we going to get first? I don't know. We're putting this on the back burner for while we go to Tuchenka. With exception of Grunt, everyone turned their heads to look at him in utter surprise. Tuchenka? Repeated Musashi. Why are we going to Tuchenka? Because of Grunt, he answered, gesturing at his student. Something's going on with him, and I need to make sure that he stays up to snuff. So we're heading to Tuchenka and find out what's happening and see if we can't keep it under control. Any objections? He asked, looking at them all. No one said anything. Good. We should be arriving at Tuchenka within the next 4 hours or so. Until then, you're dismissed. Commander, word privately? Morden asked instantly as everyone started moving towards the door. The blonde nodded and waited for everyone else to leave. What is it, Morden? He asked once they were alone in the room. Is it about the muffler you've got cooking? No. Wish to talk about something else. All right, what? He asked. You remember our talk? My work on genophage modification? Yeah, I do. What about it? Part of a team. Scientists, all types. I know that already. You told me that. Sorry. Wanted to make sure that you remembered. He could have taken that as an insult to his memory and intelligence, but given his history and not wanting to give his tenants any more ammunition against him, he chose not to. What do you want, Morden? The Solarian's face turned grim. Blood Pact mercenaries captured former team member, Malon. Last seen on Tuchenka. Might torture him. Make an example. There was worry in his voice and it also showed on his face. Recovering Malon would be a personal favor to me. Naruto's heart went out to him. He knew what he felt. There were a lot of people who got captured during the war and they didn't know if they were alive or dead, usually not until they were told that the body had been found. Why would they take him? Did they get wind of what you did? Unclear. No way to determine until we get to Tuchenka. So, what are you going to do? Coco asked him. What do you think? Right, how could I forget? There was barest hint of sarcasm in the Gobi's voice, but it was still there. He kept his attention on the Solarian. I'll do what I can on Tuchenka, Morden. But the main focus will be on Grunt. The doctor didn't protest. He nodded and said, appreciated. Priorities also understandable. Grunt is your student. Malon was mine. Want to see him safe. Do you have any leads other than the fact he was seen on Tuchenka? Last seen outside Erdnot territory. Scouts might have seen Blood Pack. Talk to them or clan chief. I'll take note of that. They walked out of the conference room with the matter left at that. Location, Tuchenka. As the shuttle finally settled down and the hatch opened, Naruto led the team out and saw the Krogan there staring either balefully or suspiciously at them. We're not in friendly company, he thought to himself. What tipped you off? Kurama asked him. He took notice of what all the Krogan were looking at. As it was, they all seemed to be looking at Grunt and Morden. Everyone, keep tight ranks, he told the team. They're making eyes at Grunt and Morden. Make sure they don't get harmed. The team closed ranks around the Krogan and the Solarian. Time to play the game. The ports on Tuchenka were only slightly better than what looked like grain silos to the blonde. There was trash everything. If it wasn't trash, it was rubble, a lot of rubble. Did this place get hit recently or something? Naruto asked himself as he walked down the stairs. 3 Krogan met him and the team at the base of the stairs. 2 drew weapons, but the one in the middle gave them both a look and they didn't fire. He turned his attention to them, looking them over. Naruto took this to be some kind of inspection and waited patiently, although he was a little concerned when the Krogan paid more attention to Grunt. The clan leader wants to speak with you, he finally said. He threw a look of contempt at Grunt. Keep your rutting pet on a short leash. Get him the right soon, or put him down. The right? Repeated Naruto mentally. It sounded like it was something important. Perhaps it had something to do with what Grunt was going through. You've got an idea what's wrong with him then? There's nothing wrong with him. Just go speak to the clan leader. His piece said. He stepped aside so they could walk through the door behind him. Said door led downward into a tunnel network that looked to be half collapsed but also in the process of being rebuilt. As they made their way through the only way forward, EDI came onto the column Erdnot clan reports use weak encryption, she explained. I see references to a captured Solarian in the logs of the Chief Scout. Talk to Scout, then, Morden declared, or Chief. Either one acceptable. Also, I have been unable to access local medical records. I suggest asking the local clan leader for assistance with Grunt's problem. Did you say we're in Erdnot territory? Naruto asked as they approached the end of the tunnel. Yes. Then I think I know who the clan leader is. The door opened up and they stepped out into a ruined hall with a giant hole in the ceiling and rubble forming a slope that went all the way down to the bottom floor. While that was the main feature, it wasn't the only one. They could see that the rest of the hall was being rebuilt, and the slope of rubble was being formed into a dais of sorts. Blocks of rubble were formed into a rough throne. And sitting on that throne was Rex. Yep, just like I thought, the blonde shinobi thought as he approached the dais. They couldn't go straight up to it, the shape of the hall and the wreckage of it wouldn't permit it. So they had to go around the side of the room. In front of the path to the dais stood 2 guards, keeping an eye out for any potential threats. When the first Krogan saw them, he didn't raise his weapon to fire, but he did regard them with suspicion. Halt! He called out to them. They stopped but did not relax. You must wait till the clan leader summons you. He is, in talks? He looked back at the dais. Naruto followed his gaze. Rex was sitting on the throne and looked bored as another Krogan stood before it. You know what tradition demands, the standing Krogan said. Clan Erdnot must respond. Your reforms will not go unopposed. You risk appearing weak at a critical time, he stated. This sounds important, Naruto thought to himself. Are you going to interrupt it? Matatabi asked. It turned out that he didn't need to. When Rex turned his sight at the path leading to the dais, he saw the team standing there and the blonde leading it. Uzumaki! He all but roared as he stood up from the throne. Well, that's an invitation if I ever heard one, the shinobi said silently. He pushed past the guards without saying a word to them, just as Rex did the same to the Krogan he had been talking to. They met in the middle and clasped hands in comradely fashion. Rex, you look as ugly as ever. I would have thought that you'd do something to improve your looks. As if you're one to talk, Uzumaki, Rex retorted. You still look like you could send Pyjax running. I thought that was Gurus. Standing right here, thank you, the Turian chimed in as he followed Naruto up onto the dais. Morden and Grunt followed. The guards wouldn't allow any more up. I noticed, Gurus, the Krogan said, looking over at him. What the hell happened to you? Before he could answer, Naruto did. He had an encounter with a woman that didn't go as planned. The Krogan grinned widely. She tried killing you while making you orgasm, Gurus? We didn't get that far, he replied. She just threw a grenade at me in the middle of the street. Rex laughed loudly at that. It was an infectious laugh that made the other 2 former teammates start laughing as well. It was a small moment where it was them enjoying what made them tick. They didn't get a lot of those. Once it was over, Rex looked Naruto over. You look well for dead, Naruto. Should have known the void couldn't hold you, he remarked. Technically, I was never dead, Naruto replied. I got kidnapped and was held prisoner by the tribe of Athame. But look at you. Hunting for Saren seemed to have a good effect on you. He looked around the hall and the Krogan there. Seems like you took my little speech about the will of Krogan seriously, he remarked. Rex grinned widely. Damn right I did, and it's because of you. You made the rise of Erdnot possible. Vermeer was a turning point for the Krogan, though not everyone was happy about it. He cast a look at the Krogan that had been speaking. Destroying Saren's genophage cure freed us from his manipulation. I used that to spur the clans to unify under Erdnot. You abandoned many traditions to get your way, the other Krogan remarked, dangerous. Rex turned to look at him, but didn't speak. Instead, he just slammed his head against the Krogans, making him stumble. Speak when spoken to, Yuvink. I'll drag your clan to glory whether it likes it or not. He turned away and walked back to the throne. So, Naruto, he said as he sat back down, what brings you here? How's the Normandy? The old one got ambushed by the tribe and then by the collectors, ended up getting destroyed, he replied, approaching the throne's base and looking up at him. I was the last one on board and almost died. Well, you look good. Ah, the benefits of a redundant nervous system, proclaimed the Krogan. Don't have that, just chakra and a lot of luck. He frowned. Of course, I lost 2 years' worth of time. Sorry to hear it, Rex said without actually sounding sorry. He waved it off. It's fine. I got a new and improved Normandy out of it. So, what have you been up to exactly? It sounds like a lot of work. That it is. We are making a neutral ground where all clans are welcome. Fertile females can be shared amongst clans. We will strengthen the race as a whole. You threaten everything that makes us strong, Yuvink growled. It will not last. Maybe, he conceded. Until then, you're lucky to be a part of it. Naruto didn't know how many clans there actually were on Tachanka, but if there had to be a neutral ground, that meant there were a lot of them. And if there were a lot of them, things could get dicey, especially since it was the Krogan he was talking about. Security has to be a pain in the ass with that many clans around, he remarked to Rex. How do you manage it? Any clan willing to send in hostages can come in. No fighting inside the camp. Each clan punished its own criminals. We stop conflict before anyone dies. Then we present a simple choice. Pay a fine and deal with your problems, or your clan is no longer welcome. Huh. Less harsh than I'd expect from you guys. He snorted and grinned. Allies from other clans like what I'm doing. They help deal with the skeptics. Many are eager for an outlet. Every time I've declared a clan unwelcomed, my allies have destroyed them. Word gets around. Having that many clans around must be difficult. Why not bring them under one banner? Yuvink snarled at him and took a step towards him. But Grunt got in his way with a hard shove. Touch him, I'll pound you into the ground, he growled. And I will enjoy it. Grunt, ease off, Naruto ordered him. He did as he was told but still eyed the other Krogan warningly. The shinobi looked back at Rex. Sorry if I said anything insulting. I was just thinking about how my own village was formed. I won't hold it against you, Uzumaki. I've read your history and I see where you are coming from. It's something I am working towards, but it's not an immediate concern. Every clan has different customs. Rites of passage, rules of behavior, battle songs, all unique. That diversity makes us great. No clan, not even mine, was meant to survive on its own. They all have their unique assets. The best tacticians are not. Jorgel has the longest breeding line. Gatatog holds the oldest settlements. Others have their own strengths. What about the women and sharing them? I don't think they would have liked that. To that, Rex chuckled. A Krogan chuckle would have been akin to a predator growling just before it pounced on their prey. It was our female clan leader's idea. The neutral area is safe, and it encourages female clans to ally with us. Attacks on Erdnot now endanger the females of all clans. Even the clans that want to see me dead will defend Clan Erdnot. Did I hear that right? The blonde asked silently. I think you did, Gyuki replied. I know that's what I heard, Isabu pointed. At the risk of sounding like a moron, he said to Rex, but female clans? None of the Krogan laughed at his question. They all looked completely serious. Nothing is more valuable than a fertile female. We know it. They know it. They isolate themselves for their own protection. We work together to set up breeding alliances. I can hardly do anything without clan leader Yuta's approval. That last part was said with a hint of a smile. Damn, things seem to be going good for you. Rex didn't reply verbally, choosing to frown slightly instead. Are they? It's been better than I'd feared but worse than I'd hoped. It can't continue, Yuvink proclaimed. You are going against what makes us strong. What did I tell you already, Yuvink? He asked. The other Krogan didn't reply, only glared at him. Naruto watched the interaction between the two of them. He could see where they stood on this situation. He had to have been blind not to, and even that would have been debatable. I guess it goes without saying that you've got people who oppose this stuff? He asked Rex rhetorically. He snorted at that. Traditionalists like Yuvink are chained Varen. Always fighting, guarding their pathetic stick in the ground. When the smoke clears, I can plant the flag on their corpses and rally the rest around a new Krogan hub. He could see Yuvink glaring disapprovingly at Rex. The Krogan also looked like he was about 2 steps away from lunging at the sitting Krogan and tearing him apart limb by limb. What was probably stopping him was the fact that he was not in his own territory, and there was a good chance Rex would kill him. You're planning a bloodbath, Rex, he said. He just nodded. It will be slow, but I won't change what we are. Krogan are judged by the strength of our enemies. Our worst insult is to say someone's not worth killing. If the aliens are just going to stand around, doing nothing but talk, Yuvink spoke out, then they shouldn't have any sort of business here. Yuvink, he growled out warningly. Stopping a fight before it started, Naruto said. Actually, he does have a point. But we do have business here. He pointed his thumb at Grunt. This is Grunt. He's on my team. But something's going on with him. I had hoped that he could get treatment here. Rex turned his attention on to Grunt. As soon their eyes made contact, the tank-bred Krogan knew that looked upon a battle master worthy of the title. He had to stand before him, not behind others. He walked forward until he stood before the throne, keeping his gaze locked on Rex. His look was challenging but not defiantly so. Rex said nothing about his look. Where are you from, whelp? He asked. Was your clan destroyed before you could learn what is expected of you? I have no clan, Grunt answered honestly. When he heard that, Yuvink started to circle him, eyeing him up and down like he was a piece of meat, albeit disdainfully. Grunt ignored him, and kept his eyes on Rex. I was tank-bred by Warlord Ochre, my line distilled from Kredak Moro Shiger. Yuvink walked past him, shoving his shoulder against him. You recite warlords, but you are the offspring of a syringe. He all but spat. Grunt paid him only the barest of attention. I am pure Krogan. You should be in awe, he proclaimed. Rex didn't pay any attention to those words. It seemed like every whelp and pup said those words. After a while, they tended to become a blurred sentence to his ears. He was more interested in the name he heard. Oka is a very old name. A very hated name, he said aloud. He got off his throne and walked down to Grunt. He is dead, the younger Krogan declared. Of course, he acknowledged. You're with Uzumaki. How could he be alive? In my defense, I didn't kill him, Naruto spoke out. He ended getting killed by someone else. Why did you feel the need to say that? Saiken asked him. I don't have a right to defend myself? He asked back, a little insulted by the idea he couldn't. I didn't say that, but there wasn't a need for it here. Let's just move on before this gets out of hand, Kurama suggested. Naruto agreed and turned his attention back to the pair of Krogan in front of him. Moving on, what's up with Grunt? Is he sick or something? There's nothing wrong with him, Rex replied. He is becoming a full adult. Puberty ritual, Morden said in realization and acknowledgement. Common amongst species with hormone-driven reproductive urges. It took Kuris a half-second later to catch on. Adolescence? He asked in near disbelief. Can't we just take him to Omega and buy him a few dancers? If it's all the same to you, Kuris, Naruto said to him. I'm going to stay away from Omega for a bit. I could run into Arya again, and I don't know if she's going to kill me or drag me to the bed and lock the door behind her. Of course, there was also his daughter, but he kept that to himself. If he thought about Kagaya, his heart hurt. Could be both, he offered. Thank you, he replied sarcastically, just what I need to think about. If the two of you are done? Asked Rex pointedly. They shut up and he continued. Look, I don't care what aliens call it. Krogan undergo the rite of passage. Yuvink had gone to the back to watch the rest of the talk with a glower. As soon as he heard those words, he pushed forward to the front. Too far, Rex, he declared. Your clan may rule, but this thing is not Krogan. When he saw that he wasn't getting a reaction, he stormed off. Rex watched him go in disinterest before finally proclaiming, Idiot. He looked back at the other Krogan there. So, Grunt? Do you wish to stand with clan or not? Naruto had some questions that he wanted answered about this whole thing. As he was about to open his mouth, Kurama spoke. Gaki, why don't you just leave it to Grunt? I want to know all the angles here. If I don't, we're liable to end up dead. You know I'm right, he told the fox before turning his attention back to the Krogan. What would happen to Grunt if he just said no? Rex eyed him, probably wondering why he was asking that question or just butting in. If he was left here, he would be killed, he answered bluntly. The clanless are not respected. A tank bred, probably more so, he added. Okay, so not taking the right is not an option. That should have been expected, Sun told him. You've seen Krogan out in the galaxy. They're fighters. To not take the right would probably be like saying you don't want to fight. Not a good thing here. His disposition is what it is, right or no? That's just him being a Krogan, Rex explained. He eyed Grunt as he said, Oker didn't that in the tank, did he, boy? He didn't, Grunt replied. I was taught by Sensei here. He looked over at Naruto briefly. Sensei, huh? He repeated, looking at the shinobi too. What makes you call him that? This. Before Naruto could stop him, he mashed his fingers into a crude hand seal and focused his chakra. It flickered over his body like a pale blue shroud. It lasted only a couple of seconds and Naruto was half afraid that it would illuminate the entire wrecked hall. To his credit, Rex didn't react visibly. He made no move to instinctively attack or draw a weapon, nor roar in surprise. The only thing he did was tilt his head a little to the side and say, huh? Grunt took that to be a sound of challenge. Well? He demanded, making his voice growl with the sound of an implied threat. He ignored the implication. He was dealing with a pup. What do you want me to say? You're a Krogan with chakra. That's surprising, I'll admit that much. He looked the younger Krogan over again. But it does damage your claim to being pure Krogan. His growl became louder. I am pure Krogan. So you say. He does say, Naruto said. He's probably more Krogan than all the Krogan here. That chakra says otherwise, Uzumaki, he retorted. The last time I checked, no Krogan was able to have chakra. He looked back at Grunt. Getting it was thought to be impossible. I have it from a good source that didn't used to be the case. The Krogan once wielded chakra, same as humans. And who's your source? Oker, before he died. Grunt here is his masterpiece, a Krogan with the ability to wield chakra. And who told Oker that? He asked. He paused momentarily. That was a question with an answer that could wind him up in a spot that he couldn't get out of. Not many people knew about the OSDs he had been finding, and he meant it to keep it like that. The team might have heard what Oker had said, but he was hoping that they wouldn't blab on him now. I don't know. But considering he was talking about his own creation and said creation can wield chakra, I'd take his word for it. His student looked at him in annoyance. Said creation is right here. I know that, Grunt. I didn't forget you. He looked at Rex. If it's any consolation, he's not a juggernaut of chakra, but he has enough. How much is enough? Well, his eyes wandered over to Morden, and he vaguely remembered the small talk they had prior to waking Grunt up. What was that comparison you used, Morden? Human chakra levels like ship in space, the Solarian doctor answered. Grunt's chakra level to canoe in river, leaky one. He almost winced at that last bit. That probably wasn't necessary. You asked, Gyuki told him. Rex regarded him with a neutral expression. Chakra is chakra, I guess. He looked at Grunt again. The offer still stands. Naruto could admit that he was a little surprised that the offer still was offered. You're serious about this? He asked Rex. You'd let him into your clan? Only because he's with you, he answered bluntly. After all, you and I killed thousands like him. Not quite as big, but many, he acknowledged. Clan are not as strong and the others will do as I say. They see the benefits of my vision. He waited silently for an answer. Grunt looked at him uncertainly. He wasn't sure how to answer. He looked over at his teacher but he shook his head. This isn't my call, Grunt. It's yours. It was an answer that he couldn't retort to since it was the truth. He turned away from all of them to look at the hall itself. He could see that it was a wreck, there was no denying that. But he felt something as he looked at it all. It was a sense of pride. A pride that told him that what was happening here was a good thing. This was where he belonged. It is in my blood, he declared, turning back to face them all. It is what I am for. Good boy, Rex said approvingly. Speak with the shaman, he over on the second level. Give him a good show, and he'll set you on the path. He walked back up to the throne, only to stop and look back at Naruto. You too, Uzumaki, he said. How many times have you stepped in a mess for your crew, Naruto just smiled at him. You've read the history books. You know my track record. He rumbled out a chuckle. That I do. That I do. Oh, one more thing, the shinobi said as the Krogan sat back down on the throne. I'm on the lookout for a Solarian. He was supposedly brought here by the Blood Pack. My scout commander can direct you. He's probably near the perimeter running target practice. Don't take too much of his time. I need a constant watch on the other clans. Got it, thanks, he said. He turned to leave the dais, and the others fell in behind him. See you around, Rex? Hunt well, Naruto. He reached behind his back and pulled out a scroll that looked like it was ancient. Actually, that would be paying it a compliment. To say that thing still had structural integrity would be calling it a miracle. Here, whelp, catch. He tossed it towards Grunt. How old is that thing? Naruto wondered as it flew through the air. And he just toss it like that? He kicked himself a little for asking that last part. Rex was a Krogan. He wasn't likely to just hand things to people. He was much too blunt for that. Thankfully, Grunt caught the scroll with ease and didn't damage it either. What is this? He asked, looking up at Rex. Something that'll help you, he answered, settling back onto the throne. I want it back when you survive. They started to leave when he said, one more thing. Naruto, about the new Biju album. Yes, I helped make it, he replied before he could finish. They left the dais behind and met up with the rest of the team. Well? Ruko asked without preamble. We got a few things to do. We're going to have to split up to do them. He looked at the team, mentally selecting each one to go with whom. Morden, you'll lead the search for Mayon, but I'll leave a clone with to keep me informed, alright? See no problems with offer, Morden replied. What about the rest of us? Jacob asked. While they didn't ask it aloud like he had, the rest of the team clearly wanted to know what it was that he was planning. I think that Morden's team is going to require a more precise hand while what Grunt needs is strength. Ruko, Gurus, Eric, you're coming with me and Grunt. Miranda, Zaid, Jacob, Musashi, you go with Morden. And what am I supposed to do? Kasumi asked. He looked at the thief, still wearing her cloak and hood. I was hoping that you'd stay here, ferret out any information that would help us. She looked like she was considering the idea, but it only took her a couple of seconds to say, well, at least you're honest about it. I do have the skills. She vanished instantly and her voice said, I'll see you around, before fading away entirely. I'd say that's her Yamanaka side having fun with us, Kurama stated. Naruto silently agreed with the sentiment, and looked at the rest of his team. Make sure you all come back in one piece, he told them all. We get it, Dad, no need to lecture us, Ruko said sarcastically whilst rolling her eyes. Everyone shared a quiet laugh over it. He wasn't offended by it since he knew full well that he had sounded like a mother hen. Once the laugh was over, they all split up to go do their separate missions. Naruto quickly made a clone that went with Morden. As they left, Naruto saw the quick squeeze of the hand Ruko gave Miranda but didn't say anything. He was actually a little impressed by his sister. She was actually trying to show restraint in public about what she felt. Are you ever going to talk about what they did? Isabu asked him. What's there to talk about? He asked back. They figured it out by themselves and I'd say they're doing a decent job of going from there. Yeah, they are, Shikaka said in a proud tone. The other Biju made it a point not to look him in the eye. Naruto agreed with them. Don't start, he warned the Tanuki. He followed Grunt up to the second floor. His student walked with an almost impatient pace as he thundered up the steps. The second floor wasn't really a floor as it was a big room with room to move around. There were a few Krogan around, standing in pairs to talk with each other or just to brawl in place. If that brawling got out of hand, other Krogan would descend upon them and literally thrown them down the stairs. Gurus was almost crushed by such a pair if he hadn't thrown himself against the wall. Whoa! He said in surprise as the two went down the steps, bouncing every 2 steps or so. They watched as the two got back up to their feet and started fighting again. No guns! One of the throwers from the top of the stairs shouted before walking away. You gotta wonder if this happens every day around here, Naruto wondered aloud, still watching the two brawlers move away from the stairs. Apparently, they could also be considerate. Don't know, don't care right now, Grunt replied, finishing the climb up the steps. They followed up the stairs and joined him as he looked around the place. Where's that shaman? Ruko started looking around too. I don't know. You probably should have asked that Rex guy what he looked like before coming up here. Gurus looked around as well and quickly saw the answer to the question. I'm going to take a guess and say it's the Krogan Yuvink is talking to, he told them, pointing out said Krogan. He was a good deal older than Yuvink and had the hump and scars to prove it. Grunt started towards the shaman, but Naruto's hand on his shoulder stopped him. No showing off the chakra, Grunt, the blonde warned him. Not until we're certain you've passed. Fine, he said, shrugging his arm free. They walked up to the shaman. You go beyond yourself, Gatatog Yuvink. He all but roared. The rights of Erdnot are dominant. How do we know it will challenge him? Yuvink demanded. He's unnatural. The beasts of the right could ignore him like a lump of plastic. Naruto watched him in surprise. Is he whining? He didn't think that a Krogan would do something like that. But there he was, complaining like a child that didn't get his way about something. That's pathetic, Sun declared. The others agreed. They had come to see Krogan as an enemy that should someone be cautious of and an ally someone would be glad to have on their side. Seeing one whining pretty much soiled that image for them. The shaman had the same opinion, looking down his nose at the complaining Krogan. They know blood, no matter the womb, he proclaimed. Your barking does not help your case. I'll speak for myself, Grunt declared, marching up to the shaman's site. He walked up to the younger Krogan. This is the tank bread? He asked rhetorically as he looked him over quickly. It is very lifelike. Smells correct as well. Your protests ring hollow, Yuvink. It has a name, Grunt. Use it or die, he threatened in reply, angry at his name not used. The shaman did not seem threatened. In fact, he looked a little amused. It speaks too. And has an attitude. Although clearly it was not taught manners, he remarked as he glared Grunt down. Naruto took that moment to open his mouth. Rex gave us the go-ahead for Grunt to try and achieve clan status. He looked over at the human standing there in his armor and cloak. Permission, he said with a disapproving snort. That's good enough, if lacking in spirit. Yuvink looked outraged at what was happening. If this must stand on ritual, then I invoke a denial. My Krant stands against him. He has no one. The shaman glared at him. My patience is tested, but Yuvink invokes correctly. Grunt, who is your Krant? Your allies willing to kill and die on your behalf? He asked. Grunt started to look uncertain, unable to meet the shaman in the eye. Naruto opened his mouth again, just to find out what exactly was entailed with that word. He can bring backup? I would have thought he'd have to go alone. The shaman answered, just like he had hoped. Not every Krogan can be the strongest warrior, but each must inspire his peers to battle at his side. If the ones who know you best can find nothing worthy in you, you should wander into the wastes and die alone before you can weaken my clan. That was all he needed to know. Then we'll stand for Grunt, he proclaimed, gesturing at Ruko, Gurus, Eric, and himself. We will be his Krant. His student looked at him gratefully. Accepted, the shaman acknowledged. Yuvink looked madder than ever as the situation went on. Aliens don't know true strength, he complained. My followers are true Krogan. Everything about Grunt is a lie. Okay, I'm getting irritated by this guy, the blonde thought to himself. What are you going to do about it? Gyuki asked him. What he would always do, make his point. He walked up to the complaining Krogan, slammed his elbow into one side of his face, and then kicked the other side, knocking him down to the ground. Aren't you supposed to headbutt him? Gurus asked. I don't have that hard of a head, he replied. Oh, I disagree, Kurama said. Same here, Shikaka said, remembering that fight between Naruto and Gaara that ended with a headbutt. Yuvink got back to his feet, staring at him in shock. You dare? He asked, surprised that he had been struck but also angry too. Would you care for a repeat? Naruto asked back, lifting his elbow. The shaman laughed loudly at that question, his laughter filling the room like a roar. I like this human. He understands. Yuvink looked at him like he had betrayed but didn't say about it. Instead, he only said, I withdraw my denial. This will be decided elsewhere. He walked away, shoving his shoulder against Naruto as he left. It was met with a resistance that he hadn't been expecting, so he stumbled ungracefully. Grunt's Krant sniggered as he regained his balance and walked away. You have provoked them, the shaman said to them, getting their attention again. Reason enough for me to like you. They're your problem now. I've dealt with things and people worse than a whining Krogan, Naruto retorted. The shaman grinned. I like your attitude. Let's get to the details. Do we need to bring anything to this rite, equipment of some kind? To begin the rite, only the candidate and his Krant are required. You love battle, Commander Uzumaki? The last gasp of a dying opponent? He asked. Bring your love of the fight to Grunt's trial, and he will succeed. Might I ask a question? Eric spoke out, looking at where Yuvink had stomped away. Is he going to be a problem? He is forbidden to interfere. Will he? The way the old Krogan asked the question, It sounded like a stupid one that was already a foregone conclusion. During the rite of passage, you must be ready for anything. From what you've shown me, you will not disappoint. Alright, so what actually happens during this whole fucking thing? Ruko demanded, getting a little annoyed that it was taking too long. He looked at her with an annoyed look that had hints of disinterest. Still your impatience, he ordered her. Fuck you too. Ruko, Grunt growled out warningly. She turned her eyes to him, jutting her chin out challengingly. What are you going to do about it, huh? The two of you knock it off. Naruto ordered. Unless you want to pin to the ground like misbehaving kids? They stopped the bickering but still sent each other dirty looks. He looked at the shaman. Continue if you would. All you need to know now is that Grunt will be tested, and that you must adapt. Like that wasn't something he hadn't done before. Being a shinobi was all about adapting to what was being thrown at them. He was certain that this time around would be no different. He looked over at Grunt, who was beginning to get impatient. You ready, Grunt? Of course I am, his student growled. You heard him, he said to the shaman. Let's get this right started. Excellent, the old Krogan growled in approval. He pushed through them and headed for the stairs, waving a hand at them to follow. He wasn't looking at a scene now. He was back inside the forest of ash. His first thought at the sight of it was, haven't been here for a while. I've just gone straight to the vision. He then paused to consider what he had thought. Was it a good thing that he was back here now instead of watching the vision come to pass? He kept on walking through the forest, trying to find the shadows and reach out to them. Like always, they faded away from him before he could even touch them. Did they see him coming and didn't want to touch him? Did they hate him? Were they the dead that he had left behind? Or were they the people he had known, and once he touched them, their faces would be revealed? He didn't see anything wrong with that idea. But perhaps they did. But if that was the case, why did I see Haku and the others when I ran into them? He asked himself. He didn't have the answer. It was something that was in the back of his head ever since he had first met Haku in this forest, and yet, he still didn't have the answer. Where the hell have you been, woman? Ino's voice suddenly shouted through the forest, making him go still. It wasn't the same voice he knew when he saw the Yamanaka on a daily basis. It was older, more mature. And hello again to you, Ino, Sakura's voice said in reply. She wasn't shouting in return but was rather talking like it was a normal conversation. He looked around, trying to find them. But all he could see were trees and falling ash. Where are they? Don't give me that, Sakura! Ino shouted some more. You were gone for 7 years. Nobody heard from you, not even a postcard. Where were you? Ino, would you sit down? Hinata asked her. We're in the middle of a restaurant. Wait, Hinata's there too? She sounded much more confident than the last time they had seen each other. She didn't even stutter once. Sorry, Ino said, sounding sheepish. She actually listened? What the hell had happened when he was gone? Hinata could hardly tell anyone what to do, let alone without any stuttering. He started looking harder, trying to find them. But they were nowhere to be found. But the point still stands. Where have you been? We were worried, she said, a gentler tone in her voice. Sakura's voice, however, was as hard as iron. Oh, you were worried? Where was that worry when I living in an apartment down the outskirts of the village? Where was that worry when people kept looking at me like I should be dead? None of you ever came to see me. You stayed away like I was a plague. Could you blame us? There was a pause and he was afraid that things would come to blows. He started to hurry his pace but then Sakura said, No, I can't. I did a horrible thing that day and I didn't feel any remorse for it. There was another pause. The boy, did he have any family? None that we could find, Hinata told her. From we found out, he had been orphaned by the war. He was coming to the village to learn how to be a shinobi when he was injured. Oh. It was the only thing that she said in response. Was there anything else she could have said? Are you going to tell us where you've been or not already? Temari's voice demanded, breaking its silence. Why am I not surprised to hear her? Naruto asked himself. There was no doubt in his mind that she had married Shikamaru. Hell, she probably dragged him to the altar herself. I was around, Sakura answered. How descriptive, she said drily. It's the truth, Temari. When I left the village, I didn't have an exact destination in mind. I just wandered around the elemental countries. I didn't care if people recognized me or not. I went where I wanted and got by selling my skills to people who needed them. I starved more times than not and would resort to begging. Eventually, I wounded up on a boat that set for exploration out west. It was struck by a storm when it came into sight of another land. I will be honest with you guys. I didn't try to save myself when it struck. I was fully ready to let the sea take me and drown me under the waves. Then why didn't you? Asked Ino. I don't know, she replied as Naruto rounded a tree, following their voices but still seeing nothing. All I know is that I woke up on the beach, and I was tended to by monks of an abbey that was close by. Once I had recovered enough, we talked and I was welcomed as an honored guest. The abbot saw that I was in turmoil and offered me the chance to ascend their mountain. Did you? Tenten asked. Ah, there she is, Naruto couldn't help but think. It seemed like he was listening in on a girl's only talk. Maybe if he could find them, he'd be able to see where they were. I did. I didn't make it to the top. Why? Hinata asked. You've climbed mountains before. Not like this mountain, Hinata. It was the largest mountain that I've ever seen. I was able to see it from the ship, and it had still towered over everything. There's only one path that goes up to the peak, and when you go up, you soon find yourself fighting against gale winds, snowbanks almost as tall as you, and ice that'll make you slip to your death. If the monks were a cruel people, I'm sure that I would have passed the bones of people who tried to ascend and failed. Why didn't you use your chakra and go up the side? Ino asked her. By the time I had considered that option, I was already fighting against a gale headwind. I wasn't going to risk that. Besides, I had the feeling that Everest would not approve of the action. Everest? Repeated a puzzled Tenten. It's what the monks called the mountain. So you didn't reach the top? Temari asked Sakura. No, she replied, and Naruto had the feeling that she was shaking her head. I barely managed to reach halfway before I turned back around. Why'd you stop? I found what I was looking for. That's helpful. Are you going to tell them, Sakura? Naruto wondered as he went around another tree. He still couldn't find them, and it didn't sound like he was getting any closer. It's the truth. Yeah, but a little detail would be nice, don't you think? She's right, Sakura, Hinata agreed. You can't just leave it at that. Can I keep it to myself? Sakura asked, sounding a little amused at their questioning. It sounded to Naruto that she was leading them on in the conversation and enjoying it greatly. But that was the first sentiment. He had a feeling that she didn't want to tell them what she had gone through. Oh, just tell us already, Temari said in a half-snap. We all know you're going to. Temari, leave her alone, the blonde thought with a protective snarl. It was her decision to make, and if she didn't want to tell them, she didn't have to tell them. Promise not to laugh? His old teammate asked. Guess she's going to tell after all. He heard Ino scoff at that. We're not kids anymore, Sakura. I think we can have a talk about laughing at something that happened to one of us. Right? She asked aloud. Of course, agreed Hinata. Yeah, said Tenten. Should go without saying, Temari remarked. Thanks guys, Sakura said to them all, her voice showing her relief. So, tell us already? Well, I have to make sure you guys already know about something else. She paused again, and when she spoke next, her voice showed her uncertainty. You've all heard about what happened to me when I was in Midgard and in the throne room of the High Jarl? You mean where you held a little boy hostage and threatened to kill him in front of his father? Hinata asked, her voice taking a slightly colder tone. Yes. Have you heard what stopped me from killing the boy? Shikamaru said something about you being stopped by a shade of Naruto, Temari replied. I had always put it down to you having some kind of hallucination that managed to snap you out of the bloodlust you were in. I wasn't in any kind of bloodlust while on Everest, when I saw him again. There was a moment of silence that he just knew was because everyone was staring at her with jaws agape. Why you saw him again? Ino repeated. Yeah, talk to him even, she replied. How? Asked Hinata, her voice going quiet. I don't know. I fell down and just wanted to die right there. When I was about to reach for a kunai, I got a hard slap across the face. When I looked up, he was standing right there. He got me back up to my feet. We talked and I ended up going back down the mountain. You just talked? It's Naruto, she said, and he knew that there was a smile on her lips. All he has to do is talk. How did he look? Ino asked him. Same as he did last time I saw him. I'm sorry guys, but could we talk about something else perhaps? Alright, fine, Temari said while Naruto went past another tree, still hunting their voices. Now that you're back, what do you plan on doing? Well, my active duty days are pretty much behind me. I had thought of going back to the hospital and seeing if they would be generous and take me back. If not that, I could probably do lobbying. Lobbying you? Ino asked. Yes. I've heard about what the Frontier and Midgard had asked us to do in regards to how old a shinobi should be. Quite frankly, I agree with what they're saying. The daimyos should take notice of what they're saying. Tenten scoffed. The daimyos don't care about that. All they do care is the fact that they're back in power, and making sure we know that. In their eyes, if a kid is from a hidden village, he's a shinobi. Don't tell me you agree with him, Tenten. I don't see the problem, but I would prefer it if the fire daimyo wasn't an asshole about it. The man acts like he had led us to victory for the last 2 wars. I just remember him as prepubescent kid Kiba dragged out of the palace's rubble, and was all too glad to let Lady Tsunade take the command. Tenten, there has to be changes in regards to the shinobi way of life. Just look at me. I held Midgard in contempt because I thought they target Mikoto and the others specifically. If the Midgardians had known how old they were, they wouldn't have attacked. They were trained and had the headbands, Temari pointed. To us, they were adults. You'd say that differently if it had been your kid, Temari, she replied sharply. But then she calmed and continued. We need to change our definition of adult. Give them more time to learn, to train, to enjoy life before giving it for the village. It's a notion, Sakura, Ino told her. Have you shared it with anyone else? Yes, with Sasuke. He agrees with me. I do too. If you're going to lobbying to change the age requirement, I'll stand behind you. I will too, Hinata said. The same for me, Tenten declared. I'll talk to Shikamaru and Gaara, if you'd like, Temari finally offered. You might have a point. Thank you, all of you. As soon as she said those words, Naruto finally found them. Or rather, he saw a vision of them. It was a picture that was balanced between 2 trees. It was a window, and through it he could see all 4 of them. Just like Sakura, the other 3 had gotten older, and there was definitely gray in their hair. The clothing they wore was casual, and he saw no headbands, making it clear that they weren't on duty. They sat loosely and they looked relatively happy, considering the subject they were talking about. When Sakura looked at the window, her eyes widened slightly. She can see me, he realized. Of course, that was the moment he came back into the realm of the living. Damn it! Nice to have you back among the living, Naruto, Geras told him from where he sat opposite. All of them were riding in a tomka towards the site of the right. Grunt was up at the front, watching where they were going with eager anticipation. Eric sat close by Naruto, looking at nothing in particular. Ruko, oddly enough, was lying flat on her back on the floor. She claimed that the rumbling was soothing. It had to have been for Naruto to fall into that level of sleep. We there yet? He asked, stretching as much as he could in the confines of the tomka. It was done by small movements so he wouldn't hit anyone. Don't know, the Turian replied. I didn't ask. Could you? I could. But I prefer to move around after this thing stops moving. Whoever's driving reminds me a little too much of Quan Misley. Don't be such a baby, Ruko said, still lying on the floor. This is fine. I've been on worse rides than this. She closed her eyes and relaxed. After a moment, it almost looked like she was sleeping. If she was, it was ruined by the tomka coming to a halt and Grunt shouting out, "We're here." We gather that by the thing stopping, Geras said to himself. Naruto heard him. He's excited, Geras. You can't fault him for that. I've seen excited Krogan before. You bet your ass I'll fault him for it. They all exited the tomka. The surrounding area was a ruin of a city. From what Naruto could tell of it, they had stopped in a garage of sorts. It was of sorts since the ceiling above them had large gaping holes in it. The rubble on the ground told him that it was a part of the ceiling once. There were massive walls all around them, but there was a large hole in the wall right in front of them. The rubble was cleared from the hole, making a path from it to the tomka. It hadn't been done recently, and that told Naruto that this wasn't the first time the Krogan had come here. The 2 Krogan that had come with the shaman got out of the tomka with their guns up and searching for threats. Apparently, they believed that despite the fact they had been here before, there was still a chance of an ambush or attack. That made Naruto cautious. He dropped his hands to his war hawks, pulling them out but also pointing them downward. Eric and Ruko took their cues from him. His sister pulled out her own weapon and held it at the ready. The Einherjar decided to go old-fashioned, foregoing the mortar on his back in favor for the battle axe. Gurus didn't pull out any weapons, but he did keep an observing eye out for anything that could come at them. The shaman exited the tamka and walked with a confidence that said he didn't worry if something would attack him or not. Grunt followed him, eagerness showing in his steps. The rest of the team fell in behind them, leaving the guards behind. "Where are we?" Grunt asked as they walked to the hole in the wall. As they climbed up and through it, the shaman replied, "This is Tachenka's most recent scar, the last surface city to fall in the rebellions. The keystone was at the heart. It has survived wars and the passage of centuries. It endures, like the Krogan. The only thing that is older than it is the old tree, which has stood since this world had formed." That was almost poetic, Gurus remarked from where he brought up the rear. "Gurus, I do not think now is the time for that," Eric told him. The blond Einherjar carried his battle axe with his hand close to the blade. "It was easier to carry that way. I was just making a comment." They came out of the hole into what was probably a plaza. It certainly looked like a plaza. There was wide spacing and there were no walls to block their view of the surrounding land. Because of that, they could feel the wind pressing against them, trying to push them down to the ground. If they weren't careful, they'd lose their footing and fall. There was a tall tower-like structure over their heads, starting at three ends of the plaza and forming a tower. If there had been any kind of additional structures to the tower, it had been long weathered away. All that was left was the skeleton of it. But even that was a mighty thing to look at and be impressed. Perhaps that was how it had been initially designed. The shaman didn't stop to admire the sight like the others had. He kept on walking. When they realized what he was doing, they quickly caught to him, although Grunt still looked up in fascination. If you wish to join Clan not, the shaman told him, you must contemplate the keystone and its trials. "What will happen?" he asked. He noticed that they were going to the other end of the plaza, where there was a staircase there with a gate closed over it, blocking their path. There was a panel next to it that had a button on it along with a speaker. It looked like it was on, and yet it didn't have any kind of power source connected to it. Who knows? You must adapt. You must thrive, no matter the situation. Any true Krogan will. "I am a true Krogan," he declared. "That will be tested here." He gestured to the panel. "When you are ready, touch the keystone and the rite will begin." "Wait," Naruto thought to himself as the shaman walked away, looking at the panel again. "That's the keystone. That wasn't what I was expecting." "What were you expecting?" Matatabi asked. "I don't know. Something more ancient, I guess." "Like an actual stone?" "Probably," he answered. "Not something that looks like it had been put here recently, that's for sure." "Well, get over it," Kurama told him. "This is not about you." "I know that." "Maybe it's that giant pillar beyond the gate?" Isabu asked. Naruto looked up past the gate and saw the pillar he was talking about. It wasn't as tall as the tower over their heads, but it was still tall. It was made of metal, but the metal wasn't rusty. It looked clean and polished, making it look a little out of place with the whole ruined plaza around them. That could work. He looked back at the plaza. They were on a higher surface than the rest of the platform, having gone up a small set of stairs to reach it. They had a good view of what was around. There were small rails at the edges, enough to make them not fall over at the first time, but not high enough to provide them with protection if it was needed. The protection came in the form of several columns jotted around the plaza. They were weathered and beaten, with bullet holes scarring every inch. It just showed how many times this place had been used for a fight. He looked out across the plaza, trying to see the surrounding land. But the wind had kicked up enough dust and dirt to form a screen of sorts, blocking them from actually seeing anything. There was something he could make out faintly in the distance, but faintly was all he had. "Is that another tower?" he asked himself. "What's the plan?" Gurus asked him, removing his rifle from his back. Snapped out of his musings, he looked over at the Turian. Before he could answer, Grunt walked right to the panel at the gate and slammed his hand down on it. The speaker came to life with a growling Krogan's voice. "First the Krogan conquered Tachenka, and mastered a natural world only we are fit to hold." "I guess that's the plan," the Turian remarked. Naruto looked at his student in exasperation. "Grunt," he said. The Krogan looked back at him. "I am ready. I do not want to wait." Behind him, the keystone made thrumming sound, lifting up a few inches and then coming back down hard. Naruto could feel the shockwave underneath his feet, and he had a feeling that he wasn't the only one. "We have incoming," Eric declared, his hand sliding down the shaft of his axe. He could hear the sound of many feet running across the ground, and it was getting louder. "I think that keystone called a few things." "Shit!" he swore, lifting his guns up to ready position. He started giving out orders to the rest of them. "Geras, get to the rail and hold position there. Eric, take the left staircase. Ruko, go with him. Grunt, take the right staircase. I'm with you." "Yes," the Krogan declared with a passion. "Let's get to the killing." He started making his way to his position as the others did too. "No one go overboard or get out of place. You do that, you end up dead. That's not something we want. So no one get any ideas, got it?" "Yeah, we got it," Ruko shouted from the other side. "Good." He looked back at Grunt. "Grunt, I know you want to get to the fight, but remember what I taught. Don't let the anger control you. You control the anger." "I know that," the Krogan replied, holding his shotgun so tightly that it looked like he was about to break it. "I hope so." "Here they come!" Geras shouted out. "It's a whole pack of Varen." Grunt saw the Varen running full speed towards the steps. He roared a challenge at them, loud enough for the shinobi at his side to wince. "Come at me," he told the Varen. "You will find me worthy." The Varen replied to the challenge by charging full speed up the stairs. 2 leapt for Grunt and 1 leapt for Naruto, jaws agape and ready to bit down. But Naruto was not ready to be a meal. "I don't need to shoot them." "Don't tell me you're getting soft now," Kurama said to him. "As if," he retorted, flipping his guns around so he held them by the barrels. "I didn't say anything about not killing them, just not shooting them." He slammed the hilts on both sides of the Varen's head. It fell to the ground and didn't get back up. He kicked away just in time to see the next one coming. He heard Grunt fire off his shotgun twice, and the Varen fell dead at his feet too. He didn't wait for the Varen to come to him. Instead, he leapt for the Varen, catching it in a lock that sent them both down the steps, bouncing a couple of times. When they reached the bottom, he broke the Varen's back and got back up. "Sensei!" called Grunt. "I'm fine," he called back as he watched more Varen come towards him. "But if you want some of the kills, you'll have to get down here." "Right," he cried in excitement, thundering down the stairs, blasting away at any Varen that came close. They took up a little formation as they fought. The Krogan stayed in the back and kept on blasting away with his shotgun at Varen that got close, inflicting maximum damage. Naruto stayed at the front, using his guns and the martial art he created through them. He hammered them down with the hilts, bashing in their brains. Any that came too close and tried lunging at him he ducked and let them sail right over, going straight for Grunt. Dealing with the Varen wasn't that hard to him. The main problem was just the numbers of them. They seemed to be continuously coming, trying to overwhelm them by sheer numbers. He could hear Geras shooting nonstop, but he wasn't sure if that was going to be any actual deterrent to the number of them. So he decided to do something about it. When he had the chance, after kicking one Varen away, he tossed his guns into the air and quickly folded through a set of hand seals. Futon de Tapa. The wind blasted out of his mouth and slammed into the Varen, sending them skidding back and no few of them flying too. He clasped his hands into another seal. "Kaige Bunshin no Jutsu," he cried out, creating another clone of him. He grabbed the guns out of the air as they came down, and the clone pulled out a kunai. "Hey, no fair, sensei!" shouted Grunt. He didn't look back at his student. If he did, he was liable to end up dead. "We're not doing points here, Grunt." "You heard the shaman. If there's a way to victory you can use it. Why don't you honor your title and create an army then?" Komiya asked him. A leaping Varen separated him from his clone, and the both of them were soon swarmed by the beasts. He didn't waste any time getting back into the fight, crushing a Varen's skull underneath his foot. "It's not my trial. I think too many clones would be seen as too easy by the Krogan," he replied, bashing 2 Varens aside with the guns to their jaws. "Plus, I don't want to waste any more chakra than I have to." Valid points, the Kabutomushi conceded. "And also, since I know I've told you this before, I don't like that title." "It rings true," Kurama told him. "You and I both know it." He chose not to reply, instead focusing more on kneeing a Varen underneath its jaw. The impact sent the creature flying upwards into the air, spinning in circles. He would have watched it go if another Varen hadn't tried ripping out his armored throat. He knocked it down with a swing of his left gun and kicked it away. After a very long 7 minutes, the last of the Varen finally died thanks to a shotgun blast from Grunt. The three of them looked at the mounds of dead Varen surrounding them, taking the moment to breathe a little easier. Haha, Grunt said in satisfaction, wiping off Varen blood from his face. The original Naruto looked back at him. He stood knee-deep in dead Varen. Having fun, Grunt? He asked. Fuck yeah, he answered with a grin. Don't tell me that's it. I'm ready to go again. He looked back up the stairs. We're done over here, he shouted. How's everyone else? I see no more Varen, Geras shouted back. And we're done here too, Ruko replied. Don't tell me that was it. I barely broke a fucking sweat fighting these guys. I'll go tag the keystone, Grunt declared, turning around and rushing up the steps. Grunt! Shouted Naruto, dispelling the clone and going after him. But his student had a lead on him. He was almost at the keystone before the shinobi grabbed him by the arms and forced him away from the speaker. Sensei, what are you doing? He demanded, trying to break free of his grip. But he held firm. You don't go hit something right off the swing of the kunai, Grunt, not when you have a chance to wait, he told him. Let's the others get back to us and we can regroup. He could see the logic behind that lecture. He put his bloodlust on hold slightly and nodded in acknowledgement. Fine, but tell them to hurry the fuck up. You know, we can hear you, Geras said as he joined them, still holding his rifle at the ready. Both Ruko and Eric joined them too. Both of them looked just blood-smeared and worn as Naruto and Grunt. Ruko had a feral grin on her face. It was clear that she was enjoying the fight as much as Grunt. Yes, it is not like we are separate by a great field, Eric said, only a plaza. The Einherjar looked a little odd with blood speckled against his beard. Grunt was impatient, and it showed when he looked over at his teacher. Now can I tag the keystone? He asked. Hold on, Grunt, Naruto said back before looking at them all. We all good? He asked. I know I am fine, Geras said. You were up on the rail, Ruko said to him. Ruko? Asked her brother. I'm fine, just itching to get back into the fight. Eric? I am fine as well, Commander. He was gripping his axe tightly, and there seemed to be a shine in his eyes. Let us continue. He took note of their eagerness. It was like Grunt's, only 2 levels lower. Keep a cool head, guys, he said to them all. We don't know how long this goes for. Ruko snorted impatiently. Come on. Let's get back to the fight. I want to kill more creatures. He knew that any more cautioning would be redundant. Go ahead, Grunt. The Krogan was already moving at that first word, tagging the panel. The Krogan's voice came back on. Then the Krogan were lifted to the stars to destroy the fears of the galaxy, an enemy only we could chase to their lair. As the voice vanished, the thrumming occurred again. Naruto readied himself for more Varen. But instead of hearing the sounds of their feet charging up the stairs again, he heard a buzzing sound in the air. He looked up and saw what looked like a kind of mix between a worm and dragon flying towards them. Shit, that's big, he remarked. You've fought bigger, don't complain, Kurama told him. Wasn't complaining, just stating a fact, he replied, pointing his guns up at the thing. Don't bother, Commander, Geras told him. He looked over at the Turian, a little surprised to hear those words from him. Why? That's a harvester. He knew the word, but he didn't associate it with that creature. And? He asked, waiting for the explanation. You can't kill a harvester from underneath. The only weak point it's got is a joint between the neck and head. Shoot that, and the thing goes brain dead. Okay, why can't I do that from here? He had the thing in his sights. He could shoot it down if he knew where to aim. And that he knew where to shoot, it should be fairly simple to do so. Guys, that thing is getting closer, Ruko said in warning. It is not alone, Eric said. Look at the other side of the plaza. There is another one. Good, Grunt growled in enjoyment. I was hoping that I wouldn't get bored. Geras ignored the Krogan, still looking at the blonde. Because that weak spot is on the top of a harvester, not the bottom, he explained. If you want to kill, you're going to have to find a way to get up there quickly. Alright, give me a minute. He put his guns away and began folding his hands together, about to create more clones. Too late, called out Eric. He looked over at the Einherjar, his hands halfway folded. Why? They're dropping pods. The harvesters landed briefly before letting go of the pods attached to their undersides. It was only a moment, but a moment was all they needed. Shit! No, Clixons! He corrected once he saw that the pods weren't really pods but rather Clixons bundled up so they'd fit easier on the harvester. What the hell are those? Giant alien crabs, work with that. Ruko told him as she faced one side of the plaza. The Clixons were on both sides and coming up the stairs towards them. She did a quick count on her end and saw something of note. There were more Varen. What? Gurus asked her, giving her a confused look as he took cover behind a column. He stayed near the center in order to give cover fire to either side. There are a lot less Clixon than there were Varen. I thought this was supposed to get harder, not easier. She was a little insulted that such a thing would happen here on Tuchanka. Grunt growled at her implied insult from where he stood close by. No, he declared, there's no way Clan Erdnot would ever allow such a weak rite of passage. There might be less of them, Eric said from the other side of the plaza, watching the Clixon come up the stairs, but they have got an exoskeleton that's as hard as they come. It will take some doing to get past it. Naruto was by the bigger blonde's side. When he heard those words, he put away the guns and pulled out a kunai. Maybe not as long as you might think, he told Eric. Would you mind lowering your axe? He gave the shinobi a look. Why? I'll give it a better edge. He folded his hands into a set of hand seals. Futon, Shinkajin. He breathed out the jutsu onto the blade and it took, coating it in wind. You want? Sure. He held out the axe head to him. He cast the jutsu again, coating the axe with it. The wind took a bit of an oval shape, matching the head perfectly. There you go, Naruto said. Thank you, Eric said politely, shifting the axe back into a proper hold and facing the Clixon once more. Anybody else want it? He called out to the others. I've got futon bullets, Gurus called back. I'm good. Too busy, I'll use my biotics. Ruko shouted, sounding strained. The Clixon must have already reached her and grunt. Speaking of the creatures, he could see them coming right at him. The others were right. They did look like crabs, but only just. The crabs he had known were much smaller than this, and their ends didn't arch behind them. They saw him and squealed in anger before charging right at him. He sidestepped the first one and sliced the kunai across the exoskeleton. It didn't go all the way through like he had hoped, only getting a deep gash for his trouble. The creature hissed angrily at him, so it did feel what he had done. He backpedaled away from its claws. If the exoskeleton was that hard, he did not want to get caught by those claws. He could get crushed by the first blow. The Clixon tried to go after him, only to cut in half by Eric's axe. You struck too lightly, Commander, he told Naruto as he pulled the axe out. The jutsu alone is not going to work. You will have to apply the proper force. Thanks for the tip, he replied, coming back to his side. Two more Clixon came up the stairs and scuttled towards them. You take the one on the left, and I'll take the one on the right? Very well, he agreed, moving to meet his Clixon. Naruto chose to wait for his to come closer and attack. He sidestepped it, and surprisingly it followed him. He backstepped quickly and got clear of it. As it turned, he slammed the kunai down hard into the exoskeleton. The blade went through deeper than the cut he had given the first. The Clixon cried in angry pain for a second before falling dead. He pulled hard to get the kunai out. How did it know to follow my sidestep? He asked himself. It's probably smarter than you gave it credit, Sun told him. The first didn't. It missed me and I was able to slice it. This one followed me through. What you are thinking? I know what I'm thinking, Komiai declared. What? Their Jinchuriki asked. It's a localized hive mind. If one of them dies, what they know is sent amongst the others. That was how they knew. It made sense. Even though it was risky, he chose to test out the theory. As the next Clixon came towards him with claws reaching out, he sidestepped it. It followed him, and he backstepped. It followed and tried snapping his leg off. He was able to pull his leg out of the way and plunge the kunai home. Shit, you're right. The Nanabai actually huffed at him. Of course, I'm right. I know bugs, remember? How could I forget when you're an actual bug? He fired back as he got back to Eric's side. We're going to have to be careful. The Einherjar chopped a Clixon in half before looking up at him. Why is that? They've got some kind of localized hive mind going for them. The ones we kill pass what they knew to the others. Irritating, but not something that could cause alarms for so few, he remarked, taking note of the few remaining Clixon coming at them. Yeah, you must have faced worse odds than this. Indeed, especially during family meetings when the alcohol was flowing particularly thick, he answered with a complete and utter straight face. As he dodged a Klickson, he cast a look at the Einherjar. How is that different? Why do you even need to ask that question? Saiken asked him. I can't just leave it at that. Because there, I have a chance of losing the fight, Eric told him, still with the straight face. He almost paused in that moment, which allowed a Klickson to get in close. Crap! He thought, reacting instantly and slashing his kunai. Again, it only gashed the exoskeleton and it got closer. Then he heard Gurus fired his gun, and a bullet hole formed on the Klickson. While it slumped to the ground, he looked back at the Turian. Hey, you're the one who said not to lose focus, the Turian said, keeping the butt of the rifle against his body. When did I say that? He would have waved it off if he had the free hand. At some point, I don't remember. The point is you're welcome. Thanks, now would you making sure we don't get swarmed? He asked pointedly. The two of you are fine. I'll go check on Ruko and Grunt. He turned his back on them and made for the other side. There was only one Klickson left, and it was coming right towards him. He gripped his kunai and slashed at it, aiming right for the exoskeleton over the head. But the Klickson backed away from the kunai. It hissed at him, almost in contempt, but then Eric's axe fell down on it, cutting it in half. Suddenly, they heard many Klicksons squealing in delight and Grunt's surprised shout. They both turned around and saw the Krogan being swarmed over by them. Son of a bitch! Swore Naruto, turning and running in that direction. Eric wasn't far behind him. Ruko was already charging her biotics and Gurus was aiming a shot. But before either of them could fire or Naruto and Eric could reach them, one of the Klickson was suddenly sent flying through the air. They stopped and watched the creature fly before looking back and seeing Grunt's foot. Then the Krogan exploded upwards, knocking all of them off. I am Krogan! He roared as he stood once more and laid waste to all of them. None of them did anything to help because, quite frankly, it didn't look like he needed help. They just watched as he went at the Klicksons and succeed. Whoa, Coco said. I guess this is what he's like when he really gets mad. I don't think that's mad, Komi disagreed. I think it's the adrenaline kicking in. When Grunt was finally done rampaging his way through the Klicksons, he stood amongst their corpses with a grin that demanded blood. Everyone looked at each other with unease and then at him. How you doing, Grunt? Ruko asked him. I feel great, he proclaimed. I feel like I could squash any enemy beneath my feet with absolute ease. Well, that's good, Gurus remarked. The others gave him a look, and he shrugged his shoulders. What the hell was he supposed to say? Killing was bad? Are there any more? The Krogan demanded, looking around for more enemies to kill. The bloodlust in him was still going, but there was something else emerging within him too. It was like a need, a drive to prove himself. Maybe it was the trails that were causing this a drive to form inside of him, but he didn't question it. He obeyed it, and it was telling that he wasn't done. There was still more he had to do, one last enemy to fight. Eric took a quick look down the left staircase. I do not think so, he said, pulling his head back. He certainly didn't see any more coming at them. As soon as he heard those words, he turned towards the panel. But before he took a step, he stopped himself and looked at everyone else. They looked tired but not so completely exhausted they were about to fall to the ground. Still, they were his Krant. He had to be responsible for them. You guys ready? He asked. Look at that, he's asking, Shikaka said in a surprise that was half mocking, half genuine. What brought this about? Sun wondered. Isabo had a thought about it. Maybe he's finally figuring out that he's not alone on this team? If that's the case, I'll take it, Naruto replied. Go ahead, Grunt, he told his student. We're good to go. The Krogan turned for the panel and slapped his hand against it. The voice came back again. Now all Krogan bear the genophage, our reward, our curse. It is a fight where the only goal is survival. With that last words declared, the keystone thumped once more. Grunt could feel the earth turning around itself in response to the keystone. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of it churning and rumbling. There was a slight pause that made everything seem to stop. Then the earth churned back on itself, going back towards the keystone. He opened his eyes. Feel that? He asked the others. Everything is shaking. There was also something coming towards them, something so big that it changed the earth itself. It made him nervous, but even more than that, It made him excited. This was it. This would be the last opponent. He just knew that if they defeated this enemy, the rite would be done successfully. I am ready. I think he might have finally lost it, Saiken declared. Hey, that's my student, Naruto said back. They all heard something moving through the earth and kept their eyes out for anything that would their way. They couldn't see anything, only feel the earth moving. Don't cluster up, Naruto told the others. Spread out. He took the left stairs, sheathing the kunai and pulling out his guns again. It didn't take long for someone to call out. It was Ruko who shouted, I see something. They all converged on her position at the railing of the plaza. Where is it? Eric asked, coming to her side. There. She pointed to beyond the edge of the plaza, near the slope of rocks. She could see a bright blue line against the creature's body that ended in split ends. Does that look like a tail to anyone else? I don't care what it is, Grunt declared, switching out the shotgun for the machine gun. I'm taking it out. He opened fire before anyone could stop him. The gun rattled and growled in his hands as he fired, acting almost like a beast wanting to be free of its chains. The spray of the bullets went wide as they shot towards the tail thing. One did hit, and it was enough to send the thing shooting back down into the ground. Got it! He shouted. But the ground shook a little bit harder, making some of them wobble around, and the head that tail had belonged to burst out of the earth, along with a portion of its body. For a moment, the team didn't do anything. They just stared at the creature before them, and it stared at them. That's a thresher maw, Gura said. Yes, it is, Eric agreed with him. That's a thresher maw. You said that already, Ruko told him. It might have sounded sarcastic if she wasn't staring at the creature herself. It's a fucking thresher maw. We got it, said Naruto. Thanks for the information, Gurus. He looked inwardly on himself and towards the Biju. Komiai, do you think you can understand what that thing might say? Wait, Shikaku spoke before Komiai could. You want to talk to that thing? No, but I would like to know what it's thinking. Naruto, you're talking about a bug of such size and ferocity, and Aburame would have an orgasm just by looking at it, Kurama told him. And you want to know what's saying while it's looking at you like you are its next meal? Priorities, Gaki, priorities. Alright, I got the hint the first time around. That thing is rearing back its head, Eric noted as he watched the thresher maw. We should probably get out of the way. The maw's head snapped forward and spat out some kind of goo. It arced up and came flying down at them. They scattered, getting out of the way, and splattered against the ground of the plaza. A slight acidic tang filled Naruto's nose as the stuff hissed away smoke before hardened up and dissipating due to the wind. I guess that's how it attacks from long distances. You're going to have to watch your step, Sun told him. He mentally rolled his eyes at the Yambi like I didn't already know that, he replied. Grunt stood out in the open while the others tried to find some cover. He faced the thresher maw without any fear and his blood and drive pounding away inside his ears. I am right here, he shouted at the thresher maw. Come attack me if you dare. Grunt, what the fuck are you doing? Ruko demanded, peeking out from behind the column she was covering in. That's a thresher maw. You don't attack them. You survive until they get bored and go away. It is there and it wants to challenge me, he retorted. Who am I to refuse it if it wants to die? He lifted up his machine gun and let loose a savage blaze of gunfire. This time, he had a bigger target and was able to strike it with more ease. But while the bullets were hitting the thresher maw, it didn't look like it was doing much. Guys, we need to help him, Naruto told the others. Are you kidding? Gurus demanded. I didn't sign up for this. Who signs up for a thresher maw attack? Asked Ruko. They just happen. Well, I demand hazard pay if this keeps up. We'll discuss that later, her brother told him as he stepped out of cover. Right now, we've got a thresher maw to kill. And how do you plan on doing that? Gyuki asked him. I think it would be safe to say that yours guns wouldn't be able to reach that far out. He looked down at his guns. The Hachibi had a point. As it were, he was the only one who wouldn't be able to help out Grunt at that moment. He was going to have to come up with something else if he wanted to help. I need to use my jutsu arsenal. You probably should have thought of that before you start creating clones and using futon jutsu, Kurama said. What chakra you have is probably only good for 1 or 2 jutsu use before you collapse to the ground. He could feel the strength of his chakra when he concentrated, and he knew that the fox was right. Damn it, he cursed. He needed to come up with another idea. Why don't you try using Sage Mode? Isabu asked. You said that you haven't done it yet, so now might be as good a time as any. He's in the middle of a battle, Coco retorted. He's not going to have a chance to sit down and wait like he's supposed to. Actually, the shinobi thought as an idea came to mind. It was risky and stupid, but when had that ever stopped him before? You got something? Saiken asked him. Yes, I'm going with Isabu's idea. Are you crazy? Did you not just hear what I had said about the idea? Coco demanded. I'm taking it under advisement. Kurama rolled his eyes at that statement. He knew what it meant. Don't bother trying to change his mind, Coco, he told the Gobi. He just told you that he's not going to pay attention to anything you have to offer now. I didn't say that. Not in so much words, but you did say it. Can I just do my thing? He looked to his team. Guys, can you take care of the Thresher Maw for a little bit? He asked them while he sat down. What did you think we were doing? Grunt demanded. Just sitting around picking flowers? Ruko agreed with the Krogan. They had been trying to figure out some way to kill the Thresher Maw. They hadn't just been sitting around shooting the breeze. She looked over at her brother and saw him sitting down, folding his legs in. What the fuck are you doing? She demanded instantly. Providing a way to help you guys, but I'm going to need a couple of minutes. Keep the Thresher Maw distracted, would ya? She almost yelled at him for his actions at that moment, except the Thresher Maw let out a shriek of a challenge and spat out more acidic goo. Ah shit! She cursed, running out of cover to avoid the goo. You'd better make it quick. He ignored her in favor of focusing of concentrating. He let the world go, allowing the sounds of Grunt roaring, Gurus firing his gun, Eric setting up his mortar, and Ruko flaring her biotics to fade away until they were less than white noise. He did not feel the ground move underneath him. It felt solid to him. He remained perfectly still and attuned himself to the nature of Tuchenka. It came quicker than he would have thought possible in his weakened state. The natural energy flooded through his body and merged with his chakra in a speed that made it seem almost starved. It damn near overwhelmed him, but he refused to let that happen. He gathered as much natural energy as he could and merged it with his own, like he had been taught. As soon as he started the process, the inhibitors woke up and hit him with pain. Everything started to hurt badly, but the inhibitors had thrown worse things at him than this. He could handle it. He gritted his teeth and continued to minge the natural energy with his own. Surprisingly enough, the pain faded as the mixture went on. It finally vanished when he faintly heard the sound of a multitude of things snapping. Fully in Sage Mode, he stood back up. He felt looser and more ready to fight. It also seemed like he had more chakra at his command. I must have broken some of the inhibitors, he realized. Guess the theory worked out after all. But he didn't know how much were broken. That was going to have to wait. He looked back at the battlefield. The others had the Thresher Maw's attention. Both Gurus and Eric were handling the long-range effect with the respective gun and mortar from the higher end of the plaza. Grunt and Ruko were a little closer, standing at the far edge of the plaza. He kept up a rapid fire with his machine gun, and Ruko was sending blast after blast of biotics at it. The Thresher Maw didn't budge or try to avoid the attacks. It stayed in the place it had emerged and spat out goo at them, forcing them to move instead. Naruto went to the rail and vaulted over, landing on his feet and still walking forward. With the chakra he had now, he could use some of his difficult jutsu. He had the perfect one in mind and was glad that Kakashi had shown it to him during the war. His hands blurred through the seals required, and when he came to Grunt's side, he clapped them together in the final seal. Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu, Water Style, Water Dragon Bullet Jutsu. He spat out water and it quickly turned into a raging torrent of water. That torrent morphed into a dragon and proceeded to lunge for the Thresher Maw with a roar. The Thresher Maw returned the roar with a shriek of its own and lunged too. The two smashed into each other, and the dragon lost its form, sloshing into water against the Thresher Maw. And that had been what Naruto had wanted, already folding his hands into additional seals. Reijiki, Lightning Strike! He shouted, throwing his hand out at the Thresher Maw. Lightning engulfed the hand and then leapt out into an arc. It struck the gigantic creature, and the entirety lit up with lightning. They could all hear the shrieks it made as it thrashed around in pain. I thought you didn't know any right-on jutsu, Gurus called out to Naruto, still watching the Thresher Maw thrash in pain. He knew that water could conduct lightning, and he guessed that was what the blonde shinobi had been going for. But he had thought it would have been more like to wait for a thunderstorm than use a right unjutsu since he didn't know any. It turns out that the Turian was wrong. I picked up a few during the war, Naruto replied, breathing heavy. But I really can't use them often. Not really my element. What he did learn was the kind of firepower that would be a considerable hit on his chakra even when he had it at full capacity. Now it was all he could do, not pant like a dog after water. I don't know if that was supposed to work or not, Grunt said aloud, getting his attention, but that thing is still moving. They all looked at the Thresher Maw as it stopped trashing around and stared at them. They could see the hatred and anger in its eyes, or what passed as eyes on a Thresher Maw, and knew it was meant for them. I don't think it worked, Geras finally said. Huh, Naruto remarked, getting back to up straight, tough critter. Komi, I said, Naruto, do you still want that translation? You can do it? Well, I understand what it's going through right now emotion-wise. Okay, what would that be? It's angry and wants to devour you. I think it will also take great enjoyment in the process. Grunt raised his gun again. Can we just kill this fucking thing already? He demanded, getting impatient. If we don't kill it, it's going to kill us. He fired off a round of bullets at the Thresher Maw. It didn't look like it had been pleased by the idea. In fact, it looked even more pissed. Are you asking for a one-shot wonder, Grunt? His teacher asked. He kept firing. If it gets this thing killed, yes, he declared. Either we win this together or we die together. And I don't plan on dying here. I think that it's about to get closer, Eric shouted out warningly. The Thresher Maw did seem to be getting taller as its body extended out of the hole. Ruka looked over at her brother with a look of increasing worry. Tell me you got something here. I do, he replied, forming a hand seal and creating another clone. Just keep it busy and make sure it doesn't move. This is risky, Kurama warned him. He started to concentrate his chakra into the palm of his armored hand, rotating it, powering it, and containing it. Tell me something that I don't know, Fox. You're still going to do it then? What does it look like he's doing? Shikaka asked him. I'd say the answer to that stupid little question is taking form in his hand. He ignored the both of them. The clone channeled the wind chakra into the jutsu, and it quickly took shape. The familiar humming filled his ears and the spinning white blades had the attention of his eyes. He had the jutsu ready and dismissed the clone. I need a clear and clean shot, he told the rest of the team. That's about as clear and clean as you're going to get, Ruko told him as she held the Thresher Maw in place with her biotics as everyone else kept shooting it. She wasn't going to be able to hold out for much longer. She could feel the Thresher Maw struggling closer and closer to freedom from her grasp. So just throw the damn thing already. All right, everyone stay clear. He held the Raisin Shuriken above his head and Grunt and Ruko quickly darted to either side, making sure that they were far out of the way. He brought the jutsu low, bringing it into a spin for speed and an additional spin to it, and then threw it right at the Thresher Maw. The creature broke free of Ruko's biotics, but by then it was too late. It was hit by the Raisin Shuriken, and soon its head was engulfed in the orb of unrelenting power. They all heard a brief shriek before the orb engulfed it. Geras braced himself against the incoming shockwave and was able to withstand it. But he was still stunned by what he had just witnessed. This was a completely different version from what he had seen when the first Normandy team had rescued Liara. The power of this jutsu was enough to actually pull the Thresher Maw's body up out of the ground by a few feet. He had never seen anything like that happen before in his life. Is that what it's supposed to look like? He called out to Naruto as the orb faded away and the headless Thresher Maw flopped to the earth. Pretty much, yeah, the shinobi answered before collapsing to the ground like a doll with cut strings. Grunt was horrified and scared at the sight. Sensei! He roared in a panic, racing to his side. Ruko was there alongside him. They started to make sure that he was okay while the other two got down to them. I'm okay, Naruto said to the both of them. I just feel a bit winded. He could already feel Sage Mode fading out. A bit winded? Repeated an incredulous Ruko. You just fell to the ground in a dead heap. Can you even get up? He tried lifting his arms to push himself up off the ground, but they felt too stiff and heavy to do that. No, it doesn't look like it. Can you help me up? She grabbed him by the offered arm and pulled him up. Her strength, and the way she pulled him up, made him wince. Easy, Ruko, he told his sister as she got him back up onto his feet. Shut up, you don't get a right to complain, she told him back, throwing his arm over her shoulder. She gripped his hand gently, careful not to let him go. Geras looked at the blonde duo as he got to them. What the hell happened? The Turian asked as Eric joined his side. I almost ran out of chakra with that last one, Naruto said. Are you going to be okay? Yeah, just a spot to sit down and relax for a little bit, maybe get some sleep. The Tomka was probably going to be the best place for it. He was actually looking forward to the nap. A shuttle screamed overhead, catching them all a little off guard. They all looked up at it, and watched as it settled and lowered itself down to Plaza. Who are these guys? Ruko demanded. They here to give us a ride or something? I do not think that we are that lucky, Eric replied as he watched the shuttle hatch open and Yuvink strolled out with a small group of guards. Oh great, Naruto thought. This is just what we needed right now. He foresaw a fight coming on and he knew he wouldn't be able to join it. Yuvink walked before the team and looked at them. Then he looked at the ruined corpse of the Thresher Maw behind them. You live, and you brought down the Thresher Maw, he said to Grunt. No one has done that in generations. Urdnot Rex was the last. Grunt didn't care about who brought the last Thresher Maw. All he cared about was how he and the team were victorious. My Krant gave me strength beyond my genes, he proclaimed, watching Yuvink, which are damn good. The other Krogan got in closer and looked him over. This will cause discussion. I wonder, he said to himself, still looking the younger Krogan over. You say you are pure? No alien meddling in your construction? Just the warlord ochre? He asked. Naruto started praying that Grunt wouldn't tell him that he had chakra. He had the feeling that Yuvink wouldn't see a Krogan having chakra as being pure. But his student only said damn right he was the only one. It is because of him that I was designed and created to be the perfect Krogan. There was a disgruntled look on Yuvink's face at those words. Being designed is the problem. But not made by aliens. And he is truly powerful, he said to himself, like he was taking verbal notes. That is a tolerable loophole. Grunt looked confused. A what? He demanded. He wasn't the only one who was confused. What's he going on about? Ruko wondered, watching the other Krogan carefully. Her free hand slipped down to her gun. It was still folded away, but she could reach it easily if things went south. A reason to accept you, the other Krogan said, walking away from Grunt. You are a mistake, but your potential could tip the current balance of the clans. Grunt realized what he was going on about. He wanted to use him as a means to take power from Urdnot Rex and lead the Krogan on to Chenka. That was not right. He could not just come in at the last moment and give him an offer to switch sides before he had even picked a side. That was wrong. It made him angry. You spit on my father's name. On my sensei's name. He spat at Yuvink. But now you stop ranting because I'm strong? With restrictions, the other Krogan told him, still talking like the silent offer was a good thing for him. You could not breed, of course. Or serve on an alien ship. He looked pointedly at the humans and Turian there when he said that. But you'd be clan in name. You say all that, Eric said to him, but it is clear that you do not want him in your clan. Of course not, he answered simply, giving the tall blonde an irritated look. I didn't really want to cooperate with Clan Urdnot either, but I had to. Clan Gatatog is on the verge, either of greatness or of joining the dust. He looked at Grunt again. I get traditionalist support if I fight you and reformer support if I back you. Your rite of passage tipped that balance too. The ground rumbled beneath as the two groups stared down each other. Naruto's team kept their hands on their weapons, but the Krogan behind Yuvink had theirs up at the ready. What do you say? Yuvink asked Grunt. Will, the ground around the plaza suddenly burst apart, and they were surrounded by Thresher Maws. What the fuck? Swore Ruko, reaching for her gun. The others did the same, but it was Yuvink and his Krogan that took the more noted action. They lifted up their guns and started shooting at the Maws. No one move! Grunt told the others. He didn't need to see the all 9 of the Maws to know that they didn't have a chance in hell. If they didn't do anything, he had the feeling that Yuvink and his little group would be the first to die. Quite frankly, it served them right. The Thresher Maws didn't disappoint. If they weren't spitting acidic goo, they were lunging down and eating the Krogan outright. Yuvink's defiance of them vanished in about 10 seconds, and they just started running for their lives. That didn't last long, and soon the Thresher Maws were all looking at them. Oh fuck, Geras moaned. What are we going to do now? Don't worry, the Krogan amongst them said as he put away his gun, I've got this. Naruto looked at his student as he pounded his fists against each other and started gathering his chakra. Grunt, what are you doing? He asked. His student didn't answer, so focused on gathering his chakra. When it reached the point he wanted it to be at, he looked at the thresher maws. They all looked at him too, hissing in anticipation of the food to come. But just as they were able to attack all at once, Grunt opened his mouth, unleashed his chakra, and roared. When the team looked at it in hindsight, to call it a roar would have been an understatement. It was a sound that was almost as visible as it was audible. They all tried to cover their ears, but even they did that, they could still hear the roar. It was like sledgehammers pounding down on large slabs of steel in the middle of a thunderstorm while a gale howled around. The force of it caught them off guard and they were driven to their knees. And still, Grunt roared. He roared all of the thresher maws, turning in place as he roared. He kept roaring until he could no longer roar, and even then, the echo of his roar was just as audible on the wind. The thresher maws all stared at him with something no one could ever claim to see a thresher maw to have: fear. They looked at him with undisguised fear. He stood tall and eyed every single one of them down. They couldn't face him, and they quickly burrowed back into the holes they had come out of. Everyone else got back up onto their feet and looked at Grunt. What the fuck was that? Geras asked him. He had never seen a Krogan do what he just did. He looked at the Turian and then at the holes where the maws had just been. I think I told them to heal, he answered. That was the best explanation he could give. Geras gave him an incredulous look before just giving up. Eric took a look around them. Well, whatever it was that you did, you also managed to scare off the wind too, he noted. The wind had died down, and so had the dust screen caused by it. They had a view of the surrounding area, but the first thing they all looked at was the tower-shaped object in the distance. What is that? Geras asked as he stared at it. It wasn't a tower, he knew that much. Perhaps it is the old tree the shaman mentioned, the Einherjar offered. That doesn't look like any tree I've seen. Grunt scoffed at that. Have you ever been on Tuchanka before now? He asked. How would you know what a tree from here would look like? Ruko agreed with all of them, but she also knew that no natural tree could ever get that big. Maybe it's an anomaly, she suggested. What do you think, Naruto? She waited for an answer from her brother but got only silence. Hey, you still with us? She asked, turning to look at him. He had heard her but he couldn't answer. He was too busy staring in stunned horror at the thing in the distance. He couldn't say anything to express what he was feeling, but Kurama came to the rescue with his own. You've gotta be shitting me. Codex entry: Technology Chakra Clips vs. Chakra Runes. Since the creation of Chakra Clips, there has been debate amongst the Systems Alliance to officially stop the usage of Chakra Runes. This is opposed by sealmakers and rune forgers inside the Alliance who have blatantly stated that if this was to come to pass, they would be out of a job. The difference between chakra clips and runes is not only in their abilities but also in their history. Runes have been in active use in the Alliance since after the War of Three Flags, see Years of Exploration, but chakra clips are only a recent thing, having been created since the attack of Sovereign on the Citadel. The abilities they give to their users are also different. While both are able to call on the elements, the bullets are able to use them far longer, and with more lasting effect. But that is all they are able to do. The runes are able to supply much variety to their effects, giving the applied weapon the ability to harden to the extent that it could break bones, send poison into the blood, to be wielded with better agility than to be expected, etc., etc. However, the more powerful the rune to be applied, the longer it would take to be carven and created and then applied to the weapon, also making it much more expensive. Whereas the chakra clips are easy to make and the user only needs to utilize their chakra to reload them. However, the clips are only able to utilize the elements, not any of the jutsu associated with the elements, and it is an element per clip. The debate has not reached such levels that protests and riots have broken out over it. The general consensus at the moment is that the clips are used for general usage and the runes for more specified attributes. But that has not quelled the debate, only cooled it.